Hey, what's up? It's Cute What If this side. Today we will be seeing, what if Deku fell in love with Shouto? Now before we move ahead with the fic, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future what ifs like this. Midoriya Izuku is 19 years old, an unremarkable college sophomore in everything aside from the nature of his unremarkability. He's quirkless. At worst, a magnet for bullying, but nowadays he's mostly just a scrawny, shortish young man, easily and quietly dismissed by those around him. He double majors in chemistry and hero studies. He's a member of the Pro Hero Fan Association at his college. He would like to be president of the club by his senior year, but currently some of its members are skeptical of how qualified he is to discuss heroes without having a quirk of his own. Right now, he's content to attend club meetings and contribute whatever he can, most specifically his vast and extensive collection of All Might merch and knowledge. All Might has been his idol since early childhood, and the man's decline in the last decade has not done anything to diminish Izuku's literal hero worship. But a lot of his peers have started to move on to the newer, younger heroes. Even Izuku has his favorites among the new CRP. Mostly, he likes the Yui heroes, because that's where All Might went. The Academy is still famous for the talent it breeds, and many of its new graduates are already predicted to be announced as nominees for multiple awards categories at the annual Japan Heroes Gala later in the year. Considering how young most of them are, this is a notable honor. Gravity had quickly stolen Izuku's heart, and he likes Ingenium a lot because of his extreme earnestness. Lemillion is basically unstoppable, and Ground Zero and Red Riot are awesome. They're everyone's favorites, of course. Bakugo Katsuki is actually from the same hometown as Izuku, and Izuku even went to his old middle school, though that was years later. Izuku has been one of his biggest defenders for years even when nobody else really liked him. But now that he's one of the top 5 pros, everyone's jumping on his bandwagon. Even though he wasn't a Yui student, Izuku likes Hawks for the cool factor, though he thinks Hawks' former sidekick turned pro hero Tsukuyomi is cooler. On the flip side, he never really got that invested in the new #1 hero after All Might, Endeavor. Maybe the blow of losing All Might as the symbol of peace was just too bitter at the time. But Endeavor was always such a different kind of hero that Izuku's obsession never kicked off in the same way. Endeavor's son, however, is a different story. Izuku's uncontested favorite after All Might has been, for at least the past 6 or 7 years, the pro hero Shouto. Todoroki had just started to rise up through the ranks when Izuku was entering middle school. The more he did, and the more Izuku learned about him, the more he found himself having the traitorous thought that Todoroki was the actual coolest. This had made him feel guilty at first. All Might was, and would always be, the coolest. But there's just something about Todoroki. The hair, the eyes, the scar, and that quirk. Izuku has spent years analyzing it, pouring hours into research, scribbling away in his notebooks. The motive behind his obsession is embarrassing. Todoroki's track record as a hero alone is enough for no one to question why Izuku likes him so much. The #5 pro after Ground Zero, Hawks, Endeavor, and Lemillion. An intimidatingly long and ever-expanding list of rescues and villain arrests, a not insignificant reputation as an eligible bachelor, and one of the most appealing faces in the hero business. The reasons go on and on. But Todoroki became Izuku's favorite just after his debut, back when Izuku was still in grade school. There's an old video online, newsreel footage, taken just after a fairly large-scale villain attack in the middle of the city. The video is mainly an interview with Endeavor, but the scene of the attack is visible in the background, with heroes still helping with the cleanup. For a very brief moment during the video, Todoroki appears in the background. He had still been something of a nobody at the time, though afforded a bit more attention due to his family connections. But at that moment, nobody was watching him. Nobody saw him stop what he was doing upon noticing a little girl, uninjured but alone, sitting off to the side of the crime scene. Nobody saw him crouch down to talk to the girl, before picking her up and walking out of frame. Izuku had scoured the internet for news articles, before finally finding a tiny footnote in one paper from a small local news outlet, just a couple of sentences, from the mother of the girl. She had been separated from her daughter, taken to the hospital after she'd been knocked unconscious during the attack. Todoroki had personally brought her daughter to her. Right at that moment, Izuku fell. In years to come, people would always point to one of Todoroki's defining features as a pro being his cold and aloof personality. It's part of his allure. But Izuku has always known there's another side to him, as warm as they come. So, naturally, he pretty much flung himself headfirst into revolving his life around Todoroki. Half cold, half hot is the whole reason he became a chemistry major in the first place. He picked up hero studies not as a hobby or afterthought, but hopefully to propel along his ideal career path. His dream is to one day work for the Todoroki Hero Agency, developing support items for Shouto himself. He does like chemistry as well. All the possibilities for theoretical to practical application interests him greatly, and gives his brain an outlet when it starts working overtime. When he's not in class, Izuku has a part-time job on weekends as a university tour guide for his school. He mostly likes his job. The high school kids and their parents don't know he's quirkless, and they usually don't find out over the course of an afternoon. Mostly the parents just have a lot of questions he's not really qualified to answer, and the kids are impressed by him simply because he's in college. At least, they are at first. His standard tour guide uniform of a short-sleeved gingham shirt and khakis is not exactly the height of cool, and he's fairly awkward and easily excitable, even at his best. The illusion of chill older guy usually fades pretty quickly. Generally, they only make fun of him when his back is turned, and not very loudly, so it's not so bad. It's an otherwise typical Saturday afternoon on campus. He's taking a group of high schoolers around the science building to show them some of the facilities, and they're a pretty attentive group, asking lots of questions, although a couple of them have been imitating him and giggling about it whenever he accidentally talks too fast and starts stammering. They don't seem to mean any real harm, and he just smiles sheepishly and reminds himself to calm down and speak at a normal pace whenever it happens. They're in the chemistry building, Izuku's home turf, and nearing the end of the tour when the ground floor suddenly explodes without warning. Izuku has spent his entire life being obsessed with heroes. Now, during his first encounter with real, live villains, his first thought is, I could never have been a pro. It's terrifying. The ground keeps shaking beneath his feet. He can't tell if it's more explosions, or if structural damage to the building has weakened it to the point of collapse. There is smoke everywhere, choking him. People are screaming, crying, mostly kids a lot younger than him, too young, afraid they're going to die. Izuku's second thought is, I have to get them out of here. He SCK in a lungful of air, coughs violently, and calls out, everyone. Then again, as loud as he can, when no one hears him the first time. Listen, we need to go out the fire escape and get down to the ground. Quickly, people start to take notice, possibly because he seems to be the only one doing more than panicking. Though, to be clear, he is definitely panicking. But he's the only person who knows this building, so he's got to act. He keeps his voice loud, jumps up and down to make sure the kids can all see him as he herds them out of the classroom and down the hall. He's not very tall. He reaches the fire exit door at the end of the corridor and flings it open, to be met by blessed fresh air. The scene outside is a nightmare. Other buildings have been attacked and are on fire. Helicopters already hover above the campus, news crews filming the carnage from a safe height. One at a time, please don't push. He calls as the kids all start to file out onto the fire escape ahead of him. Thank God, they're going to make it out. He has this thought a split second before the most violent explosion yet rocks the building, knocking him to his hands and knees. Screaming erupts again, but this time it's accompanied by the horrifying shriek of grating metal, as the fire escape begins to tear away from the side of the building right before Izuku's eyes. Half his tour group is already on it. No, he screams, completely helpless, useless, as he watches it fall. And then, someone saves them. There's a crackling, crystalline sound, the most familiar, wonderful sound to ever reach Izuku's ears. It comes a split second before a massive slab of gleaming ice rises with blinding speed, appearing almost out of nowhere to bracket the fire escape, holding it fast and secure against the side of the building. I have it. A voice shouts, and Izuku was wrong. That's the most familiar, most wonderful sound he's ever heard, and he looks and sees him. Beneath the fire escape, looking up at them all, stands their savior, pro-hero Shouto. Oh my god, Izuku whispers. Then he realizes he's going to have to save his fanboy meltdown for later, because he can't tell his mom about this if he's FC King dead. He jumps to his feet and starts directing the kids back down the fire escape. Wrap your sleeves or your shirts around your hands, he yells, and watch your step on the ice. He knows from his research that Todoroki's ice is cold enough that once exposed to outside air, the surface will begin melting instantly, causing it to become slippery. They've almost all made it onto the fire escape, when one of the last girls to climb on turns to him, weeping openly. You have to get on, Izuku starts to tell her, but she cuts him off. We got separated, she gasps, and I don't see her. I don't think she went down yet. What? Izuku asks. Who? My friend. He feels fear mounting again. He recognizes this girl, because she and her friend were the two that kept mimicking him. He has gotten a pretty good look at everyone as they fled onto the fire escape. He has not seen the other girl. Someone screams from behind them, from inside the building. FCK, he says. Okay, go, you need to go. I'm gonna get your friend. You are. Just go. He only hesitates for a second, long enough to make sure she starts out onto the stairs, before turning and racing back through the door. It's bad inside. The air is thick and smoky, enough to make his eyes water, and the last blast that rocked the building seems to have crumbled parts of it. Sections of the roof and hallway have caved in, resulting in a huge pile of rubble. And then he sees what he's looking for, and his heart jumps into his throat. There's a girl, struggling and trapped beneath some of the rubble. She must have been one of the last ones in the line to get out, and nobody noticed in the explosion. Izuku rushes to her. Are you hurt? He yells, and she startles so badly upon seeing him that it almost scares him in return, before she starts sobbing. He can't even make out any words. Izuku takes a deep breath. Hey, it's okay now, I am here. All Might's catchphrase blunders leaving his mouth, stammered and hardly heroic. But the girl stops panicking long enough to listen to him. More help is on the way. But I need you to tell me if you're hurt. And my leg hurts, she says. And I can't move. The pieces of rubble she's stuck under are undoubtedly heavy. Izuku swallows. Okay, he says, okay, just stay calm, and I'm gonna get you out. He doesn't know if he can do it, but he has to try, or at least, make her think he can. He can't just let her be afraid. He hefts some of the loose slabs of concrete off the pile as best he can. Oof, those are already nearly too heavy for him, but he'll never be able to do it all at once. His palms get SCD to hell clearing things away, but finally, it's just the last toppled chunk of the wall left. Gritting his teeth against the pain in his hands, he plants his feet, grips the edge, and heaves. Right away, he can tell it's not going to happen. He swears and strains, sweat pouring off him. He swears to himself he'll put in more hours at the gym after this, if he survives. But the concrete isn't moving, no matter how strong he pushes. The girl watches him with terrified eyes. Please don't let me die, she begs. I'm not going anywhere. I promise, he wheezes, and then throws all his weight into it. I promise I won't leave you. The concrete starts to shift. Izuku is so surprised that he almost loses his grip on it, but a voice calls out to him to move. He gasps and spins around. He's no longer alone in the hallway. Todoroki has arrived, ice lancing forward to lend support to the crumbled concrete. Before it spikes upward, a protective sheet forming over the girl as more ice pushes the rubble away with sheer force, power unrestrained. Izuku wants to cry with relief and shock. Crow. Izuku urges the girl, and he reaches out to her as she scrambles free of the debris. He helps pull her, supporting her as she gets to her feet with a wince. Nothing looks broken, but her ankle may be sprained. Okay, you go out the door at the end of the lookout. Todoroki shouts, and before Izuku can tell what's happening, a wall of ice rises in front of them. But an explosion follows immediately, and the ice barrier simply shatters. In the back of his mind, Izuku registers that something is strange. There is no light, no heat, accompanying the blast. But then the dust clears, and all his thoughts are wiped away as he stares down the hallway right at one of the villains responsible for everything. All he has room for is fear. It's strong to tell if the villain is a man or a woman. They're covered from head to toe in some kind of formless, black getup. They raise a hand, or what would have been a hand on a normal person. At the end of their arm is a strange, whirling black mass, like looking down a darkened tunnel. Run, the girl says tearfully. No, Todoroki starts to say. Exit is too far, his quirk is long range. Izuku rattles off in one breath. He just blew up the ice from that distance, and she's injured. We'll never make it. Trying to carry the girl will slow him down too much, and Todoroki can't pick her up and use his quirk at the same time. Izuku pushes the girl behind himself nonetheless. It probably won't do anything to save her. Classroom, Todoroki says under his breath. The black mass at the end of the villain's arm starts to shudder alarmingly. Go. Todoroki throws out more ice, this time aiming for the already weakened support structure of the building. The rest of the hallway crumbles, as Izuku and the girl race for the nearest classroom doorway, her arm over his shoulder. He hears the explosion, and turns just in time to see a blast of wind send shards of concrete and ice flying. Todoroki is caught in it, he's spun around by the force, his costume tearing to shreds. He staggers, falling through the doorway, and Izuku slams it shut and locks it, for all the good that will do. They have probably seconds, maybe a minute tops, to figure out what to do before the villain blasts away the rubble Todoroki caved in to get to them. Izuku tries to take a deep calming breath, and smells, beneath the smoke, a musky, sweet odor. His plan forms. Are you okay? Izuku asks Todoroki. The pro-hero is slumped alarmingly on the floor, leaning against the wall, teeth grit in a grimace as he clutches his right arm. He doesn't seem to be able to stand. Right side, Todoroki says. Can't feel it. Don't think I can use my ice. When the villain comes in, I'll use my left so you two need to take cover. No, Izuku says hurriedly. He can barely contain his panicked glee over the phrase use my left because Todoroki is talking to him about his quirk. He would be convinced this is a dream if he wasn't so absolutely sure he's about to die. He has to focus. He waves his finger in the air vaguely. Do you smell that? The sweet smell. Yes, Todoroki replies. He's staring, famously recognizable eyes sharp and all attention focused on Izuku, which is something Izuku can't afford to process right now or he'll stop functioning. That's ethylene, he says. It must be leaking from somewhere and it's flammable as hell. SHT, Todoroki mutters. It's fine, Izuku says, because it's also gonna save us. Todoroki's eyebrows raise. How? Another explosion blasts down the hallway, likely the villain clearing a path to them. But Izuku shudders to think of what would have happened if they'd still been standing out in the open. He needs to move fast, or he might still get to find out. Actually, it's not, exactly, but it's hydrate, diethyl ether, sure can, he explains, because if he just keeps talking, maybe he can keep calm enough, have the presence of mind to do this. And if they're keeping some in here, which they should be, if I'm smelling ethylene, we can use it to knock this BSDRD out cold. He looks at the girl stuck there with them. What's your name? Hana. She whispers. Okay. Izuku smiles at her. Hana-chan, I really could use an extra pair of hands to help find this hydrate. Be extra careful, and start looking in that cabinet over there, okay? It will be clearly labeled. Diethyl ether. He spells it out for her just to make sure she's got it. The chemicals in this lab aren't a joke. He hates that he doesn't have time to give the girl safety gear, at least a pair of gloves, but they're already opening shelves, searching frantically. Another explosion goes off outside, and Hana yelps in fright. Hana, do you know what a hydrate is? Izuku calls to her. What? She asks, bewildered. And no. Well, he says, trying to ignore the way his own hands are shaking. A hydrate is just a substance that contains water. They're created by adding water, or its elements, to another molecule. Oh, okay. Hana whimpers. Yep, pretty cool stuff. Izuku says. Another boom, closer. He flinches, and keeps going. So, he croaks, diethyl ether is a liquid formed out of the vapor phase hydration of ethylene. It used to be used as an anesthetic. You mean, Hana says, it'll put him to sleep. Exactly, Izuku tells her. He glances at Todoroki to see that Todoroki is still watching him intently. His eyes are really, really appealing. Izuku has never seen them up close before, only in videos and magazines. There are footsteps outside, and he wrenches his gaze away. A shadow seeps into the room beneath the crack under the door. There is someone standing right outside it. Izuku's heart hammers so strong he is sure the villain on the other side can hear it. Senpai, Hana says, so quiet he can barely hear her. I found it. Izuku reaches out without looking at her, eyes still fixed on the door. He feels a bottle settle into his palm. The door blasts open. With a monumental effort, Todoroki pulls himself upright, planting himself between the civilians and the villain, ready to fight with his bare hands. But then Izuku pops the cap off the bottle, pulls his arm back, and flings it as strong as he can over Todoroki's shoulder. It hits the villain square in the head and shatters. They stagger backwards, and Todoroki charges, lunging clear off his feet to body check them out of the door right as they fire off another explosion from the vortex stump of their arm. It blasts so close to Izuku that it slices a cut open on his cheek, narrowly misses Hana, and blows a gigantic hole through the back wall of the building. Izuku stands there, paralyzed for a brief second, before recovering. Shouto. He flings himself through the doorway and sees Todoroki lying next to the villain on the floor. The hero struggles to sit up, but the villain doesn't move. It worked, Todoroki says, as Izuku rushes to his side. They're passed out. Izuku collapses to his knees next to him. Holy sit, he whispers, holy sit, holy sit, holy. Hey, Todoroki says, and a steadying hand lands on Izuku's shoulder. Take a deep breath. Slowly. Izuku nods, inhaling deeply. He needs to make sure Hana is okay. He needs to stop trembling. He needs to get out of this FC King building. He needs. You saved my life, Todoroki says. Izuku freezes. Then he looks up. Todoroki Shouto is staring at him, his eyes calm but wide, dust and soot all over his face. His perfect, handsome face. He's more appealing in person than Izuku could have imagined, even now when he looks more disheveled than Izuku has ever seen him when he's staring out of the pages of some glossy magazine spread. He looks older than he usually does in those photo shoots, too, maybe because of the lack of makeup, or possibly due to the extremely recent near-death experience. He's also huge, up close, not quite as big as his 6.5-foot father, but still tall and broad and sturdy. You just saved all of us, Todoroki says again. What's your name? M-Midoriya, Izuku chokes out. Midoriya Izuku. Todoroki nods. Midoriya, thank you. Izuku bursts into tears. Without thinking, he flings his arms around Todoroki, sobbing disgustingly into the older man's shoulder. After a second, he feels Todoroki's arm come up, and a warm hand pats him soothingly on the back. It's all right, now, Todoroki just keeps repeating softly. It's a different kind of reassurance than All Might's, less bombastic, but no less comforting. Izuku just clings to him and cries, and Todoroki doesn't push him away. The other pros find them like that in just a few minutes' time. They bring Izuku, Todoroki, and Hana out to safety, where Hana is reunited with her friend. All the other kids are safe, and ambulances have started arriving in droves. Izuku is almost immediately mobbed by paramedics, and he doesn't even have the strength remaining to say anything as Todoroki moves off in the direction of the other heroes where the news crews are already gathering. His movements, especially along his right side, are still very stiff. The paramedics check Izuku out thoroughly to make sure he's okay and doesn't need to go to the hospital. They bandage his hands and give him water and wrap a blanket around his shoulders. He sits in the back of an ambulance, kicking his feet aimlessly. He can't stop shaking. Nearly a half hour has passed when someone drops down to sit next to him, startling him. It's Todoroki again. Izuku stares at him. The danger is behind them, which means Izuku is now all too acutely aware of the fact that he has to exert the mental effort to form sounds into syllables to make words to speak to Todoroki Shouto, in the flesh. Hello, again, Todoroki says. Izuku gurgles. Todoroki is there to get looked over by the medics as well, which they do with brusque efficiency, checking his reflexes and any larger injuries. When he's deemed fine, they move off, leaving Izuku alone with him. Alone with Todoroki. Todoroki's costume, shredded on top after the villain's first explosion, exposes a lot of bare skin. Izuku is spiraling. How are you doing? Todoroki asks him. Izuku says, his voice coming out a shrill squeak. How is it possible for a human being to be so attractive? How is Todoroki's voice so low and so nice? I don't know. Todoroki snorts, and Izuku panics internally. He must sound so dumb. Todoroki must think he is an idiot. Yeah, that's fair, Todoroki says. Izuku gapes at him. It is. Villain encounters SCK, Todoroki says with a shrug. And that's even when you're trained to handle them. You aren't, but what you did back there, that was impressive. Izuku's face explodes into heat. And no. He waves his hands frantically. Me, I didn't do anything. You saved everyone on the fire escape, and you made sure we didn't get hit by all those crazy explosions, and you freed Hana-chan. I was wondering where you went, Todoroki says, and Izuku falls silent. I saw you at the top of the stairs, then the next second you were gone. That's when the other girl came running up to me. She told me you went back to save her friend. I tried, Izuku says, completely ashamed at the reminder. But I couldn't. We would have both died if you hadn't. You went back, Todoroki repeats. And then you were there to save us both, when I couldn't do anything. Izuku ducks his head, his lower lip wobbling. That was just really lucky. It is lucky that you were there, Todoroki says, and then nudges Izuku's shoulder with his own. Guess I owe you. What? Izuku jerks around to look at him. You don't, shoo, Todoroki-san. Todoroki is fine, Todoroki says, with a look that suggests he's trying not to laugh. Todoroki-san, Izuku says again, emphatically. You don't owe me anything. Without you, we'd all be dead. He swallows. Saying it out loud is a bit terrifying, even after the fact. Yes, Todoroki says, just like I would have been if you hadn't been here. Izuku opens his mouth to argue further and then stops himself at the look on Todoroki's face. He settles for a tiny nod, and staring at his feet. Midoriya. Izuku looks up at him again and almost passes out when he realizes how close Todoroki is. It only gets worse when Todoroki reaches over to grab his face, holding Izuku's chin in his hand so he can turn Izuku's head to the side. Todoroki narrows his eyes, peering at the long scratch on Izuku's cheek. They didn't give you anything for that. Izuku shakes his head and Todoroki CLCKS his tongue in annoyance. Hold on. He CLCKS open one of the little metal canisters on his belt to procure a square band-aid patch and tiny tube of disinfectant. Painstakingly, he squeezes a little of the paste onto a cotton swab. His hands are very steady, even if they are a bit too big for the task. Izuku watches him, transfixed, and realizes he's got his tongue stuck between his teeth in concentration. Oh, he's so cute. Turn, Todoroki instructs him, and Izuku does as asked. Sorry if it stings. It's okay, Izuku says. He closes his eyes as Todoroki gently swabs at the cut to clear away the BLD and grime. The disinfectant stings a little, but then fades to a tingly coolness. Todoroki finishes up by affixing the bandage over the cut. His left hand is warm as his fingers brush Izuku's cheek. Just barely. Be sure to put more disinfectant on it when you change the band-aid, Todoroki tells him. Okay, Izuku whispers. He can't manage to get any more volume to come out than that. Thank you. Do you have your phone on you? Yes, Izuku says, surprised. Can I see it? Speechless, Izuku fishes his phone out of his pocket and hands it over. Todoroki fiddles with it as he nervously watches, before handing it back a moment later. Izuku stares at the screen. Todoroki has created a new contact. For himself, Todoroki Shouto, and a phone number, right there in Izuku's phone. Todoroki Shouto just gave Izuku his phone number. Can I trust you with that? Todoroki asks him. Izuku nods lightning fast, staring down at his phone in shock. Good. Text me, if you want, so I can save your contact. I'll be in touch. W with me? Izuku asks. No, Todoroki says, with the other guy who saved my life today. All right. Izuku stammers. Todoroki pats him on the shoulder again and then stands, ready to depart. Izuku needs to say something. Anything. Todoroki starts to cross the grass. Todoroki-san, wait. Todoroki turns. Izuku hops to his feet, out of the back of the ambulance, and bows as low as he can without toppling over. He struggles to get the words out. I wish it could have been under better circumstances, but I'm so glad I could meet you. Todoroki nods. You know, he says, in retrospect, I don't mind the circumstances all that much myself. Take care, Midoriya. He bows, then, not quite as low, but respectful all the same. Then he waves goodbye and is gone, soon swallowed up by mobs of more important people who need him. In his wake, Izuku feels like he is floating. All the people bustling around seem to have forgotten him, so he starts on the trek back to his apartment. He needs to call his mom, surely she's seen the news by now. He looks at his phone again and realization sets in once more. Todoroki said to text him. Oh, God, Izuku murmurs. His hands are shaking again, maybe even worse than they had when he was being attacked. Oh, geez, okay, I just gotta do this. He taps on Todoroki's contact and sends a very quick and hopefully not embarrassing message. Hi, Todoroki-san. This is Midoriya. Thank you again for everything. He's already back in his apartment by the time he gets a response. It sends his heart up into the stratosphere once again. Hello, Midoriya. I should have said back there, I'm glad we could meet today, too. Izuku touches his fingers to the band-aid again. He imagines he can sense the lingering presence of warm fingers there. It makes his head spin, and his chest feels light and like it's being tightly constricted at the same time. He might have almost died today, but Izuku has never felt happier, because now he's had the chance to see for himself that Todoroki Shouto is every bit the hero he has always believed in. A phone call is here. A phone call is here. Izuku's phone wakes him up the next morning, shortly before his alarm. Half asleep, he pats his covers in search of it, answering it without even glancing at the caller ID. Hello. Morning, Midoriya. Izuku nearly drops his phone as he bolts upright in bed. Tito. Sorry to call you so early. Todoroki-san. He screeches. What? How? Good morning. WHY? Are you calling me? He's still asleep. That's it. He must be dreaming. That's the only explanation possible for Todoroki's voice in his ear before 8 a.m., so husky and warm and low. Oh, dear. I wanted to give you a warning. Todoroki says. Have you seen the news yet? The news? No. Izuku blinks in confusion. 1 second. He doesn't have a TV in his tiny apartment, but he grabs his laptop, fumbling to keep the phone caught between his shoulder and cheek as he boots it up. He should probably just put it on speaker, but he still can't really believe that it's Todoroki on the other end. Izuku doesn't really want to put the phone down and have Todoroki talk to him from farther away. Okay, he's being creepy, isn't he? He doesn't know which news site to check, so he just pulls up NHK World to look at the homepage. For what feels like the 100th time in far too few hours, his heart skips several beats too many. Why am I? His eyes feel like they're bugging out of his head. Why am I on the front page of the news? Todoroki says. It's true. News coverage of the villain attack from yesterday is plastered all over the homepage, but for some reason, one of the primary stories seems to be the one about himself and Todoroki facing the villain in the chemistry building. There's a video taken from one of the helicopters he saw, of him trying to get people onto the fire escape, Todoroki showing up to use his ice to save it from collapsing. Then the camera zooms in on Izuku talking to the girl before turning and running back inside the building. There's multiple headlines, videos, articles. Heroic university student saves 24 lives. Who is Midoriya Izuku? Man evacuates people from collapsing building. And finally, quirkless boy wonder rescues season pro. Oh, he says softly. Midoriya. Izuku doesn't respond at first, too busy staring at the headline. Todoroki prompts him again, questioningly, and he shakes his head to clear it. The tone of some of the articles leaves a sour taste in his mouth, like what happened makes Todoroki less than capable, just because Izuku doesn't have a quirk. Nothing, he clenches a fist in his blankets. They found out I was quirkless. That, Todoroki says. I think that may be why the story blew up in the first place. I wasn't expecting it to gain this much traction, or I would have warned you yesterday. Izuku utters, a little whine in the back of his throat. I'm sorry. There's a brief silence on the other end of the line that feels like it lasts slightly longer than it should, before Todoroki asks, why are you apologizing? You didn't know I was quirkless, Izuku says, and I didn't tell you, and now. There was no reason for you to inform me, Todoroki interrupts. I should be the one apologizing. And no, it's fine. I know that kind of thing is private, Todoroki continues, but I don't think most people are thinking about it in this instance. And I don't care if you're quirkless. Izuku SCK in an unsteady breath. Don't. Not at all. Izuku knows, he's known, with every fiber of his being, that Todoroki is a good person. He's always believed that. But this one tiny thing, that Todoroki has acknowledged and accepted about him, is so personal. It's so different from knowing Todoroki jumps into burning buildings to save civilians. It's something he's done only for Izuku. Izuku is grateful. How did people even find out who I am? He asks tentatively. Todoroki says, and for the first time since they'd met the night before, he sounds unsure of himself. I told them. You did. Izuku asks. But why? Because I can't take credit for everything, Todoroki tells him. And because I wanted people to know who you are. After what you did, you deserve at least that much. Izuku can feel his eyes welling up already. Geez, the sun's barely in the sky and he's already crying. I'm sorry if I overstepped, Todoroki says. No, Izuku swipes at his watery eyes. I still can't really believe all this happened, but it does mean a lot to me, Todoroki-san, that you thought of me. There's a soft huff on the other end of the line. Was that a laugh? Midoriya, I haven't done anything but think about you since last night. Izuku does drop the phone this time. When he picks it up again, his cheeks on fire, phone slipping in his sweaty hands, Todoroki mercifully does not seem to have noticed and is still talking. Saved 24 people. You didn't hesitate. Someone I know who I admire a lot used to tell me when I was still in school. That's the mark of every great hero. Izuku doesn't know whether to be more giddy over his praise, or the fact that Todoroki has been thinking about him. He keeps scrolling through news articles, some of his awkwardness fading as the surrealism of the moment starts to sink in, when there's a knock on his door. Oh, 1 second, he says, hopping off his bed. There's someone at the door. Midoriya, wait, Todoroki starts to say, but Izuku is already opening the door, phone still held to his ear. 1,000 blinding flashbulb pops go off in his face, leaving him stunned and somewhat terrified. Midoriya-san, cries one of at least a dozen reporters, all with mics pointed straight at him, cameras rolling to capture his every move. Can you give us a quote about your daring rescue on campus yesterday? That sounds like what I called to warn you about, Todoroki says. The last shot the reporters get before the door slams in their faces is Midoriya Izuku, wide-eyed, in a set of official Shouto hero uniform pajamas that are slightly too big for him. Todoroki-san, he whispers, leaning against the door and gasping for air. He can still hear the clamor outside his apartment, people shouting his name. Help me. Don't panic, Todoroki says, I have a plan. The plan turns out to be a joint interview on one of the most popular variety shows on Japanese television. Izuku isn't really sure how he manages it, maybe by throwing around his agency's considerable weight. But Todoroki stops the media from ing him in the interim before the interview. They arrange for filming to occur on a day when Izuku doesn't have any early classes. The morning of the interview, he arrives by train, following Todoroki's very detailed directions. The studio is unbelievably bright and loud and he's already sweating in his suit, maroon, with pinstripes. It clashes horribly with his shoes. The receptionist at the desk is distracted by multiple phone lines and doesn't immediately look up when he nervously introduces himself. Who are you here to see? She asks vaguely. Todoroki Shouto, Izuku asks, feeling clueless himself. Todoroki had said to ask for him, but Izuku is suddenly sure that everything he is doing, currently, is wrong. The receptionist looks up at him. Oh, she says. Oh, you're Midoriya-kun. Sorry, I'll buzz you through. Just go around the corner there to the elevators and up to the 6th floor. He pushes through the turnstile once she's unlocked it and does as asked. His knees knock together the whole way up to the 6th floor. The elevator dings and the doors slide open and Izuku's panic grows tenfold. There's tons of people there, very stylish, busy-looking people, with high heels and sleek hair and holding clipboards. This contrasts with Izuku in every way possible. He is wearing sneakers, his hair is a bird's nest, and he has absolutely no clipboard of which to speak. He wonders if there are extras around, if it would go unnoticed if he just snagged one when no one was looking. He needs a safety clipboard. Midoriya, over here, a voice calls out, and he turns and sees Todoroki standing there. Izuku is fairly sure he dies and ascends to heaven in that moment. True, the other day he'd thought that Todoroki couldn't have looked better than he did, disheveled and grungy from the fight. That was probably a combination of shock, delirium, and adrenaline, however, because now Izuku sees that he was a fool. Interview-ready Todoroki is a whole different beast. And that beast is dangerous. Todoroki isn't wearing a suit, just a slim-fitted dark navy blazer with a white button-down underneath. His trousers, also navy, hug his long legs. The shirt is some thin, soft material that clings to his chest distractingly, and the top buttons are undone, so the skin of his collarbone and a little lower peeks through, exposed. The watch on his wrist is a bit chunky, but not unattractively so, and looks incredibly expensive. His short hair is combed back off his forehead, swept over from right to left so that more white than red shows. He looks simultaneously more casual than Izuku and yet a million times more put together. And the outfit, with its tailored lines and clean cuts, really shows off just how big he is. Taken all together, this is, in Izuku's opinion, 100% more life-threatening than a villain attack could ever hope to be. Good to see you again, Todoroki greets him as Izuku joins them. Why you, too? Izuku stammers. Did I overdress? I wasn't sure what to wear. A stylish woman in glasses standing next to Todoroki eyes Izuku like a hawk. He recognizes her a moment later as Todoroki's manager. When she taps her clipboard with her pen, he has to resist the urge to hide. Should we get him into hair and makeup? She asks. It's nearly time to go on. Todoroki's face molds into the sort of hardened blankness he exudes when he disagrees with something. Izuku has seen him do it in a million interviews. He's fine, Todoroki tells her. Here. He reaches for Izuku, who stands very still and tries not to make any sudden movements. Todoroki tugs his jacket off his shoulders and passes it to his manager, and then after a moment's consideration, removes Izuku's bow tie as well. His mouth twitches. Top button, he says. Oh, all right, Izuku says, hands flying up to undo the button under his throat. Todoroki nods. Better. An assistant scurries up to the two of them to tell them they can proceed onto the set. Ready? Todoroki asks Izuku. Izuku erupts into nervous giggles that he has to work very strong to stifle. No, this time, Todoroki does actually offer him a tiny smile. It'll be over quick. Promise. The set, like the rest of the studio, is very brightly lit. Izuku and Todoroki are led to a blindingly white couch where their hosts, an energetic comedy duo, greet them exuberantly. Todoroki is a fairly frequent guest of theirs and they genuinely seem to know him well, wasting no time teasing him about something or other, some old inside joke. They're very engaging, even Todoroki cracks a smile here and there, seeming very much at ease. Midoriya, let me introduce you, Todoroki says, and the two turn their attention to him, beaming in welcome. This is Kanda-san and Mori-san. They were kind enough to fit us into their schedule on short notice. Kind enough. Mori exclaims, eyes wide. I thought Kanda-kun was pulling my leg when he told me you asked for an interview. I thought hell had frozen over. He accused me of doctoring your voicemail. Kanda protests, very indignantly. I still haven't recovered from his first interview, Mori says. Do you remember that? The one why you made it a game. Izuku chimes in, clapping his hands together in delight, to try and make him smile, but he didn't. The other three all turn to stare at him, and he realizes, too late, that he's given himself away. You remember that? Todoroki asks, as all the BLD drains from Izuku's face. But before he can shrivel and die of embarrassment, Kanda and Mori both start roaring with laughter. I can't believe there's still someone who remembers that. Kanda crows. Besides us, that is. You want to know a secret? Mori whispers conspiratorially to Izuku. He smiled as soon as the cameras stopped rolling. Really? Izuku asks eagerly, curiosity winning out. He is stunned. He never knew this about that interview. This is true behind-the-scenes knowledge of Todoroki Shouto. I knew what they were trying the whole time, Todoroki says dryly. A friend found out and warned me. It was unfortunate luck having earphone jack on the show right before you, Kanda admits. But we had fun, just like we will today. Ah, they're signaling. Feeling much less panicky, Izuku takes his seat beside Todoroki on the couch. Welcome back, welcome. Kanda says, enthusiasm bubbling out of him. Next up, we have two incredibly exciting guests, who have caused a big stir these past few days. I think everyone will be very familiar with one of our favorite returning guests, Todoroki Shouto. Todoroki nods at the camera stoically as the audience cheers and claps. But our second guest is very new to being a hero. Please fondly welcome, Midoriya Izuku. Izuku is on his feet reflexively before he can stop himself, bowing awkwardly and exhaling a nervous thank you for taking care of me. Immediately, their two hosts start laughing about this, comparing it to Todoroki's barely there acknowledgement. Amazing. He really gives you this feeling of gratitude. That's true, that's true. But then, Todoroki-san. The studio audience laughs uproariously as Todoroki stares back at them impassively. Izuku waves his hands frantically. I'm sorry, no, it's because I'm really nothing like a hero. He tries to say, I'm just very honored to be here. Ah, so Todoroki-san must not be very honored then. Mori says with a wicked twinkle in his eye, and Izuku starts stammering in despair. Before he can apologize any further, Todoroki grabs the back of his shirt and tugs him back down onto the couch. I told him you were nice, so don't tease him, Todoroki says, with something approaching an admonishment in his voice. The hosts capitulate readily, but he still plants a hand reassuringly on Izuku's shoulder. Besides, it's all right. I don't mind that he keeps showing me up. Izuku gapes at him as everybody laughs again. Finally, now that pleasantries have been exchanged, the hosts move on to conducting the actual interview portion. Izuku discreetly tries to wipe his hands on his breath. His palms are as sweaty as they've ever been and he can feel perspiration gathering at his hairline. He wishes he had a handkerchief handy, but it's too late for that. First things first. You had a special announcement you wanted to make. Mori prompts. Todoroki nods. Yes, I just found out I was nominated for the Rescue of the Year award at this year's annual Japan Heroes Gala. I'm really grateful for everyone's support. There are a lot of OS from the viewers. Izuku is among them, although the noise he makes is more of a squawk of excitement. Congratulations, Todoroki-san. He yelps. He knew Todoroki would get nominated for something, and this is one of the most prestigious categories. Todoroki gives him a tiny, fond smile. I'm sure I owe that nomination to you. Izuku's brain cannot compute this outright. Speaking of that, Kanda cuts in, pointing at Izuku. Midoriya-kun, the entire nation of Japan wants to know more about you. You're an ordinary university student. Yes, very ordinary. Izuku confirms, drawing another laugh from the audience. Before the attack, that day was just a day like any other for you, Kanda says, and now his tone has changed to that of a storyteller's. A hush falls over everyone as he helps Izuku weave the tale for the cameras. Can you talk us through that, up to when the attack started? That's easy enough for Izuku to do, and he finds himself settling again, as he tells them about his school, what he majors in, and his job. He explains that he likes showing the groups of touring students around and answering their questions, although sometimes he wishes he could be less awkward. Ah, Kanda notes, so you're saying, usually people expect you to be intimidating. But actually, they make you feel nervous. Mori chimes in. Kind of. He's more afraid of you than you are of him. I'm literally always more afraid, Izuku says, covering his face with his hand. But, Mori says, leaning forward, nearly on the edge of his seat, when the building you were in was attacked, we can show the viewers what that looked like. A large screen behind them comes to life with images of the chemistry building from that morning. Flames and smoke pouring out of the first floor windows. The audience murmurs in shock and Mori turns back to Izuku. Midoriya-kun, can you tell us what happened? Oh, sure. To a rapt audience, Izuku relays the story. How he basically freaked out with everyone else at first. How the smoke started to choke him, and the floor started to sway beneath his feet. How he realized, eventually, that none of the high school students he was watching could be expected to take charge, and how he led them outside. Incredible, Kanda says. And Todoroki-san, it was about then that you showed up, wasn't it? Right? Todoroki says, and begins to tell his side of the story from that point onward. So, this is where everyone wonders exactly what happened, and Todoroki-san, maybe you can clarify. The kids had all made it to safety when Midoriya-kun ran back inside the building. Yes, Todoroki says, because they weren't all safe. There was one still trapped inside. What? Midoriya-kun. One of the girls had gotten stuck under some rubble, Izuku confirms. It's so lucky she wasn't seriously hurt. I think I've seen some interviews with her. Ah, Hona-chan. Yes, Izuku nods. I went back to help but I couldn't. This part is still a bit strong to dwell on, and his throat starts to close up at the memory. He remembers staring into a young girl's frightened eyes and thinking she must realize she's going to die. All because he hadn't been strong enough to do anything. The concrete was too heavy. I thought. That's when I got there, Todoroki says, taking over. Izuku exhales slowly. Relax. The other kids told me what happened so I came in after them. I got there just in time to hear Midoriya saying he wouldn't leave. Even though he couldn't do anything. Mori presses. Why? The question is directed at Izuku. He swallows, hesitates. She would have been alone. Another murmur goes through the audience as Mori's eyebrows raise. I know there's no recording of what happened inside the building, Todoroki says, but I heard him promise not to leave. I think he would have stayed even if he had to face the villain by himself. But, Kanda says, doesn't that mean Midoriya-kun would have? Yes, Todoroki says, blunt as always, he'd have died. There is a very long period of silence, during which Izuku mostly stares down at his hands in his lap. I think we can all say, Mori eventually speaks up, that we're glad you were willing to take those risks. In fact, we do have a message for you. For me, Izuku asks, dumbfounded. The large screen that has been showing footage of the attack changes to a different image. The inside of someone's home, it looks like. Two girls wave out at the audience, and Izuku yelps, Hana-chan. It's Hana and her friend, the one who told Izuku she was still trapped inside the building. They both seem to be having a strong time not lapsing into giggles, but Hana regains control quickly in order to talk. Hello, Midoriya-senpai, she says brightly. Hi, Izuku says, waving back. It's pre-recorded, Kanda tells him in a stage whisper. Izuku freezes with his hand in the air, face going hot, as the audience laughs. Akemi and I wanted to tell you, Hana continues, that you were awesome. Even though it was so dangerous, you were really brave. Also, she twists her hands together nervously, before bursting out. We're both really sorry that we laughed at you before. Please, forget about that, because you're actually really cool. She glares determinedly into the camera for a second, like she's daring him to argue. Izuku laughs at this, stunned. He is very much not really cool, but he appreciates the sentiment immensely. I'll never forget that you came back for me, Hana says. Thank you. The message is a short one. Hana is already waving goodbye, and the screen is going blank again. Izuku, however, just sits there, too stunned to know how to reply. Midoriya-kun, Mori says finally, surprisingly gentle. This all doesn't sound to me like you're always afraid. That's the thing, Izuku stutters, because it all seems very grand, but when it comes down to it, I don't think I've ever been more scared in my life. I really don't know how pros do that all the time. He glances at Todoroki, feeling grateful all over again, and is startled to find Todoroki staring at him just as attentively as everyone else, even though he was there, and knows this part of the story. Being a hero doesn't mean never feeling afraid, Todoroki says, more to Izuku than to the cameras or the audience. Kanda hums. True, so true. So now, the two of you are both in the building, with the villain. What happens next? Retelling this part of the story to such a captive audience is honestly a thrill. Izuku gets overly excited describing the way Todoroki had removed the rubble and shielded them from the first explosion, and everyone gasps at the last-second rescue. His explanation starts to veer a bit too much into the technical side of things. The villain had been explained, later on, to cause explosions using sound wave frequencies, which was fascinating when Izuku wasn't in danger of being murdered by it. And then there was the marvel that was Todoroki's ice, density, temperature, cryogenic structure. The hosts gently steer him back towards the account of the actual events. So then, Kanda says, I think this is the most amazing part of the story to me. You saved everyone with chemistry. Izuku laughs sheepishly. Not exactly. I wasn't mixing chemicals or anything like that. That's, Hollywood stuff. It wasn't quite that, no, but he thought. Incredibly fast, Todoroki muses, recalling the moment. Even before that, he had a good handle on our weaknesses, the villain's strengths. I remember thinking, who is this guy? The audience laughs pleasantly, and Izuku ducks his head, as a whole rush of something he's not used to feeling comes crashing over him. Todoroki had acknowledged his quick thinking. He's second to no one in that area, well known for being one of the most well-collected and fastest acting pros in a crisis. For him to have thought that highly of Izuku, it makes Izuku feel genuinely proud of himself. Wow. Perhaps sensing that Izuku is far too overwhelmed to talk, Todoroki continues. After I got hit, I was basically useless. I thought I could use my fire, but turns out that would have probably killed us. He looks contemplative. I don't think there was any way out of that room. The other pros didn't get there for another 4 or 5 minutes, and by then it would have been too late. But Midoriya-kun found a way, prompts Kanda. Todoroki explains how Izuku had figured out the connection with the anesthetic, and how he and Hana had searched for the diethyl ether. Hollywood. Mori shouts, breaking some of the tension built up from such a harrowing tale. That's completely Hollywood. To be honest, I could barely believe it either, Todoroki admits. But he just kept talking, he kept Hana calm, despite everything. I could see how scared he was, but he kept trying to smile. And I just got this feeling from him, like I could trust him with my life, and that he'd get us out. Lots of US from the audience follow this statement. Todoroki tells the rest of the story as Izuku stares at him, speechless, unable to believe what he just heard. Amazing, Kanda says, when he's done. Really amazing, isn't it? The audience claps their agreement, and Izuku tries again to execute an awkward bow from his seated position. One thing I kept thinking while listening to that was, how did Midoriya-kun know to do all those things? And I think one reason is because you're very interested in heroes, right? Yes. Izuku nods, having somewhat recovered from before. It's kind of a hobby of mine, even outside school. But you, and correct me if I'm mistaken, are quirkless, aren't you? Izuku had expected this to come up. Todoroki starts to interject. I don't know that that's relevant too. It's okay, Izuku tells him quickly. It's not a thing he advertises, but he doesn't like to seem embarrassed of it either. It's just who he is. I am, yes, quirkless, I mean. I know it's unusual. When I was still really little, I wanted to be a hero more than anything. And, well, I couldn't, of course. There are some sympathetic noises, and he waves his hands hurriedly. But it made me really, really interested in them. I've always thought heroes are amazing, so I wanted to study them, and who knows, maybe at some point I'll still be able to get involved in some other way. More applause follows his words as the hosts commend him for pursuing his dreams in the face of great adversity. It's kind of embarrassing, because it's not like he's the only person who's ever had to make the best out of bad luck before, but it is also nice to not be told he's on a fool's errand. So you know everything there is to know about heroes, then? Kanda says. Yeah, kind of, Izuku says. He grins shyly. I'm pretty good at impressions, too. Oh, Mori exclaims delightedly. Do some, and we'll try to guess. Oh, okay. Izuku draws a blank at first. It's not often people actually want to see his hero impressions. He goes for the first one he can think of, steeples his fingers, smiles brightly, and says, everyone, do your best and we'll all get through this together. The whole crowd UOS, and Mori actually shouts in shock. He points at Izuku. Uravity, he says. That was totally the anti-gravity hero, Uravity. Yes, you got it. Izuku says, beaming. Okay, what about? He makes his arms stiff and movements robotic as he says sternly, your evil doing stops here, villain. You won't get past me. That's ingenium, Kanda says. 100%. How does he make even his face look like them suddenly? Mori wonders. Maybe he does have a quirk. There's a snort from next to him, and Todoroki puts a hand over his mouth, but not quite fast enough to hide the smile growing there. He's making Todoroki laugh, keep going. Be relentless, Midoriya-kun. Everybody wants one more, so Izuku thinks strong before going for broke, adopting a ferocious grin and growling out, I'll kill you. Die, SCOME. It's ground zero. Ground zero is here. Everyone, stop laughing immediately, or it will be bad. The whole audience is in an absolute uproar. The hosts are pretending to cling to each other in fright, and Todoroki gives up, putting both hands over his face as he dissolves into laughter. The hosts jump out of their seats and start telling the cameramen to zoom in on this rarest of sights, as Todoroki tries to turn away from them. It takes a very long time for things to calm down again. Izuku can't stop smiling. He made Todoroki laugh. He has a playlist of interviews saved where Todoroki smiles, but outright laughter is so rare he can count the number of videos on one hand. Now there will be one more. It's almost time for us to wrap up, Kanda says, but before that, I have to know. Who is your favorite hero, Midoriya-kun? It has to be Shouto. Mori says. Yes, he's my second favorite. Izuku confirms. Second. Mori gasps like he's been personally offended. Kanda puts a comforting hand on Todoroki's shoulder, which Todoroki just stares at. Belatedly, Izuku realizes his grave mistake. He gasps even louder than the host. No. Stay strong, Todoroki-san, Kanda says. Todoroki shakes his head, amused. He doesn't have to say I'm his favorite. But, Todoroki-san, I admire everything about you. Izuku tries to clarify, somewhat desperately. I've looked up to you for years. It really is no competition between Todoroki and the rest. He likes other heroes, but he adores Todoroki. What do you admire most about him, Midoriya-kun? Kanda prompts. Really, everything, Izuku says, and his face is going red, but he has to explain properly. I always thought he seemed like he wanted to be a hero. Just to help other people. Izuku fidgets in his seat. There's a lot he wants to say, a lot built up inside him from the years and years of observation and idolization, crystallizing with utter clarity the past few days. He might not ever talk to Todoroki again after this interview. This is probably Izuku's one and only chance to tell him the things he always wanted to say. He takes a deep breath and turns to look at Todoroki. I've been a fan since you became active, so I've watched you since the beginning, Izuku says, the very beginning. I remember you, from UUE sports festivals, but I think the first time I heard about your work as a pro hero was the fight against Razor Edge. Oh, that is far back, the hosts confirm as the audience makes some noises of amazement. I think what amazes me most is how strong you always work to reassure people, Izuku continues. You've mentioned how that kind of thing was difficult for you at first, because you weren't very outgoing. But I think it's obvious how much you care about your fans and the people you helped. And now, I got to see that firsthand. I can't believe how nice you actually are. Even your smile it makes me so happy. I know some people still like to say you're cold, but even before I knew you, you always made me feel safe. Izuku trails off, realizing too late that his infatuation is palpable in everything he says. Todoroki is silent, watching him with a frighteningly unreadable expression. The hosts also seem quietly stunned. Oh, also I have your entire figure series collection. Izuku bursts out, even the limited edition models. The one saving throw is the mark of a true fan. Actually, he has a lot more than just models. His Shouto memorabilia collection is as vast as his All Might one, although somehow even more embarrassing. In his defense, he discovered Todoroki right around the very fraught days of his teen years, and Todoroki is very attractive. There are some fan comics Izuku has tucked carefully away that he would not want anybody to find, ever. I take it back, Kanda says, breaking the silence. Clearly you have a very high opinion of him. Izuku nods, emphatic. I do. Todoroki finally blinks, his pretty eyes very wide. Midoriya. He's my favorite active pro hero, Izuku rushes to clarify. The reason I said second is because my first favorite hero has always been All Might. I wanted to be just like him when I was younger. Ah, Todoroki says. I think I can handle placing after him. Izuku smiles at him, relieved, and he smiles back. What made you want to be like All Might? Kanda asks. This is Izuku's oldest memory. I wanted to save people, he tells them. With a smile. The hosts nod understandingly. I sense a common thread, Kanda says. And now, I think, you can say you've achieved it. We are so sadly out of time for today, but thank you both for joining us this morning. Thank you so much for having me, Izuku says, before turning to Todoroki. Thank you for inviting me. They wrap up after that, but get to spend a little bit more time chatting with the hosts, and more of Todoroki's team. The scary, stylish, bespectacled manager seems to have warmed to Izuku considerably, and seems very pleased with how well he knows Todoroki's brand and history, which Kanda and Mori keep randomly quizzing him on. Todoroki keeps trying to make them knock it off, which only encourages them more. Izuku is enjoying himself so much that he almost forgets the time. It's an errant glance at his phone that makes him squeak a surprised exclamation, and start apologizing to everyone as he hastily makes his goodbyes. I should go, if I want to catch the next train back. I'll be late for my afternoon class otherwise. We can arrange a driver for you, Todoroki says. Eiko. His manager nods, already making a call. Should it be more than 3 minutes? Is that all right, Midoriya-kun? Oh, yes, that's really generous, Izuku says. Having Todoroki and his team go out of their way for him makes him feel extraordinarily guilty, but it's already in motion, it seems. They're very efficient. They bid the show hosts a last farewell and head down to the lobby. A sleek black car is already waiting at the curb, and Izuku is already wondering if it will be too embarrassing to roll up to campus inside it when Todoroki walks around and gets in behind the driver. Izuku jumps in the back on the passenger side. Why, you're coming with me. Your university isn't much out of the way of my agency, so I thought I might as well, Todoroki says. Would you rather go separately? No, Izuku gasps. This is okay. All right, Todoroki says. To the school first, Todoroki-sama. The driver asks. Yes. They're both quiet for a few awkward moments as the car pulls away from the curb. Izuku sneaks a glance over at Todoroki to see the hero is watching the world go by outside the window. His placid expression gives away nothing of what he's thinking, but he still manages to look regally handsome. Izuku barely feels worthy of being in his presence. I didn't not want you to come with me, he says softly. I just wasn't expecting it. Ah, Todoroki says, turning to look at him. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. Oh, no, I'm not, Izuku says. He's just furred, but that's nothing new. Todoroki still looks unsure, so Izuku barrels ahead to a new topic. Congratulations again on being nominated. Todoroki shakes his head. I should be thanking you, he says. I meant what I said. I wouldn't be nominated if not for you. You don't know that. Izuku protests. You had some amazing saves the past year, like that flipped bus in April. Or the baby in August. Todoroki's mouth twitches, and Izuku realizes he's revealing his hyperfocus a bit too obviously again. Sorry, there's a reason they announced my nomination now, and we both know it, Todoroki says, and even Izuku can admit that's true. What happened at the university has really caught everyone's attention. Todoroki clears his throat. Seriously though, I can't believe you remember which month those other things happened. I hadn't realized you were. I didn't know you were such a... Izuku stares at his knees, cheeks burning up. A fanboy. An expert, Todoroki amends politely. But now that I do, I can't help but feel I've made a terrible impression. Izuku WHB his head around to stare at him. Todoroki is watching him very seriously, like he truly believes what he's just said. Never has anyone been so hopelessly wrong, and Izuku doesn't mean to say what he does next, but his thoughts are completely jumbled between don't FC King let him think that and I'd never think something so stupid. And what comes out is, don't be FC King stupid. Todoroki's eyebrows lift in shock. Izuku claps his hands to his mouth with a strangled shriek. Am I? Todoroki says slowly, being FC King stupid. That's not what I meant to say, Izuku wails, slumping forward until his forehead touches his knees. You haven't made a terrible impression at all. Unlike me. I don't know exactly what you meant to say, Todoroki says, but I think I got the gist. It seemed very emphatic, which is fortunate for me. It is. Izuku asks, still mortified. Well, given I wanted to arrange a tour of our hero agency for you, Todoroki says, yes. Izuku slowly raises his head to look at him again. Todoroki is watching him out of the corner of his eye. Like he's afraid if he looks at Izuku full on, Izuku will fling himself out of the moving vehicle. Honestly, the assumption might not be that far off. Arrange a what? Izuku asks dumbly. I might have thought to ask sooner if I'd known about your expertise, Todoroki says, still judiciously refraining from calling Izuku a total nerd. But listening to you in the interview, hearing your interests, I thought that maybe that would be a good way of thanking you. But Izuku flounders to find the right words as he comprehends what Todoroki is saying. You already did. This interview was the thanks part. Subjecting you to being a talk show victim isn't exactly what I'd call a proper thank you, Todoroki says. That was just to get the press off your back. Maybe this is a bit egotistical of me to offer, I just thought. It's not. Izuku practically yells. No, this is very. He waves his hands by his face excitably, and then laughs, too loud. Yes, please, absolutely. Todoroki blinks at his increase in volume level. So, you would like to visit? It would literally be the best thing that could ever happen to me, Izuku tells him. Oh, Todoroki says. Great, I'll set it up. Then he smirks, the tiniest bit. Also, second best. Izuku CCKs his head. It would be the second best thing, Todoroki explains. The best would be seeing All Might's agency, right? Izuku puts his face in his hands again, peeking through his fingers so he can watch as Todoroki's smile widens to an outright shit-eating grin. Todoroki-san. Naturally, every member of the Pro Hero Fan Association on campus has seen all the news coverage about what happened during the villain attack a couple weeks prior, so it's no surprise that everyone is aware of what took place involving Izuku that day. However, it seems nobody realized the full extent of what happened to him and Todoroki until after the talk show interview airs. I can't believe you almost died, says one of his friends at their weekly circle meeting. Mayumi is a sweet first-year girl with an affinity for the history and fashion of hero costuming. Senpai, that was so dangerous. Izuku scrubs a hand through his hair bashfully. Yeah, I'm still sorta processing it myself. One of the older boys smacks him on the back and he stumbles. It's been a month, Midoriya, he says. Just accept it, you're a national treasure. No, I'm sure everyone will forget pretty soon, Izuku says. The news cycle moves fast. He's very unused to receiving this amount of attention in meetings. Mostly he stays quiet. When I saw your interview, says their president, and Izuku nervously stands at attention under her gaze. I thought, he spent so much time studying them, of course he wouldn't stop to consider he shouldn't do what he did. She gives him a tiny smile. You're kinda dumb, but really brave, Midoriya-kun. The club president is a very pretty, popular senior who has never so much as spoken to Izuku before, and he can barely look her in the eye when he says, yes. Thank you. He's so desperate to be a hero, he'd kill himself trying. Izuku tries not to wince. This last is said by their vice president. She does speak to Izuku, frequently, but it's not usually something he looks forward to. She is generally the reason he stays quiet in most meetings. I was hoping not to die, mostly, he says hesitantly. I can't hear you when you mutter, Midoriya, she says with a sigh. Anyway, it's a good thing you know so much about chemistry, since you couldn't have really done anything else. Her quirk is seeing slightly better in the dark than most people, which wouldn't have been any help in the situation, either. But she doesn't really hide the fact that she thinks it's lame that he's so obsessed with heroes without having a quirk of his own. Yeah, Izuku says, lacing his fingers together in his lap and staring down at them. He knows he might be pretty useless normally, but he was still able to save Todoroki and Hana. That feels like the most important part, so he tries not to forget it. He remembers what Todoroki said to him. It was lucky you were there. Izuku smiles a little bit. Just lucky, I guess. I think it's really lucky you were able to meet Shouto. Squeals Mayumi. He's your favorite. Were you dying? I kinda was, Izuku says. He's really amazing, in person. Is he nice? Yeah, he is, Izuku confirms eagerly. I was pretty freaked out about talking to him at first, but he's super nice. You must be so happy to be right about that, his kuhai says brightly. And relieved, Izuku admits. Is that why you said you think it's so obvious he's not cold? The vice president asks. Oh. Izuku and the vice president don't exactly see eye to eye on Todoroki's hero persona. She's actually a fairly well-known artist among Shouto fans, but while her art itself is very nice, Izuku often feels she has a tendency to portray Shouto as overly well-mannered, standoffish, and indifferent. While a lot of people enjoy this part of Todoroki's appeal, and he can be that way at times. Izuku has always insisted that this misses the nuances of who he actually is as a person. Todoroki has shown plenty of times in the past that he can be very rude, but it often comes from a place of strong emotion. He's also funny and warm and kind. A lot of times, people forget all this when they only want to idolize his sassy ice prince persona. But it's just plain wrong. Of course, Izuku has never told her she's wrong to her face. But he has made his opinion on Todoroki clear on Twitter, and his thread about it had gained a surprising amount of retweets. Given their mutual contacts, she had seen it, and retweeted it with a caption that suggested she had been personally attacked, to all her followers. They had not been very nice about it. She had apologized during the next club meeting, saying she only wanted to have an open discussion. But regardless, Izuku's Twitter has been private for the better part of 2 years. This is fine by him. He never had any followers or anyone interested in him anyway. After the past few days, though, he's been getting a lot of follow requests that he has steadfastly pretended not to notice. I just wanted to make sure he knew how much I appreciated him reaching out to me. Izuku explains, voice rising at the end into a nervous question. It's not, strictly speaking, a lie. He wasn't even thinking about her specifically when he said that. There was too much else going on. But yes, it does feel good to have first-hand evidence that he was right all along. He seems to really like you, Mayumi says. Like, a lot. She is peering at him with a very significant expression and he giggles nervously under her scrutiny. Like I said, he's really nice. I guess so, but those pictures are really something. She sing-songs. Huh? Izuku asks. What pictures? What do you mean? She gasps loudly. You haven't seen them. He was there, the vice president says loudly. But he was talking and stuff. Mayumi says, oblivious. He might not realize. She WHB out her phone and after a moment of searching for something, holds it out to him. This thread, senpai, look. Baffled, Izuku takes her phone from her. It shows some Twitter thread from a popular pro-hero fan blogger that tends to be a little more on the ridiculous side, usually heavy on the memes. It's all a bunch of images from the interview, with the caption every single time at Todoroki Shouto looked at Midoriya Izuku like he was the best thing to exist during that interview. They tag Todoroki in it. Izuku's stomach churns as he scrolls through screenshot after screenshot, all of which feature, as promised, any moment Todoroki was watching Izuku during the interview. Of course Todoroki was watching him, Izuku was telling the story and Todoroki was listening. He wants to point this out, but he keeps getting distracted the further he looks. He hadn't had the chance to look at Todoroki that much during the interview. He'd been too preoccupied with talking without stuttering or making a fool of himself. So he really hadn't noticed how intense, practically unwavering, Todoroki's gaze was. And it's not just that he's watching Izuku closely. He looks protective when Izuku gets furred over being teased, amused when Izuku is describing his school and job. And in the parts where Izuku is talking about the attack, there's something alight in his eyes, something soft that makes Izuku's heart do an incredible series of flip-flops. It looks like fondness, pride. Almost, but it's even warmer. Those are, Izuku says faintly, handing the phone back to his clubmate like it's a grenade about to go off. Those are lots of great Shouto pictures, yeah. She looks exasperated at him. You didn't even look at the best one. She tugs on his arm and he reluctantly leans over to look at her screen. His dread mounting higher. The last tweet in the thread is actually a moving gif. Izuku doesn't remember which moment this was, but he seems to be explaining something in a particularly animated fashion. He pauses for a moment and runs a hand through his hair, a nervous tick as much as to get it out of his eyes. The gif very rapidly zooms in on Todoroki, who has been watching Izuku intently the entire time, just in time to catch him LCK his lips, tongue running over them to wet them. Oh, Izuku utters out loud, without quite meaning to say it. Oh, He wants to say it's just editing. He doesn't know why someone felt the need to make all of this, make nothing look like something. It's awful, because what if Todoroki sees this and regrets everything? Their interactions, the interview, inviting Izuku to tour the agency. He seems very focused, Mayumi notes. People's lips get dry, Izuku replies defensively. Even Todoroki's, which are perfect in every way. Not that Izuku has been staring at them up close. Oh, no, he's not going to be able to stop thinking about Todoroki's lips now, is he? He sighs. At least there's probably no way he saw any of this. Todoroki has millions of followers, all tweeting at him, about him, every day. He retweeted the first one, the girl tells him, so he did. He what? Izuku says dully, as his heart PND out what are undoubtedly its last few ponderous beats. He what? The vice president snaps. Okay, the club president says, clearly sensing disaster. It's time to get started everyone. The vice president looks murderous. Izuku sits as far away from her as possible and tries not to make eye contact the entire rest of the meeting, or think about the fact that Todoroki retweeted a thread of himself staring at Izuku. Izuku has no idea how he's going to face him again at his agency on Friday. Todoroki does not retract his invitation, much to Izuku's everlasting surprise. So come Friday, he finds himself walking up to the posh, multi-story office building just outside the city center. It's a building he knows well, given its proximity to his school, which is not entirely a coincidence. His reasons aren't purely creepy, though. He chose to study so close because it's not unusual for the agency to pluck students fresh from his university, given their familiarity with it. Or maybe that's still creepy. He's not sure. He smooths down the front of his shirt, feeling nervous about his choice of attire. He actually asked Todoroki earlier in the week about what he should wear. It was an office building, so business wear. Business casual. He'd had no idea, so, still feeling amazed that he could just do it, he'd sent a text. Todoroki had called him back, instead. Just dress casually. Really? Izuku asked. Are you sure? It's my agency, Todoroki replied. How would I not be sure? It was a valid point. Maybe you're worried I have crappy business clothes, Izuku says. Todoroki had let out that low snort of laughter he sometimes did that always made Izuku grin, too. Are they maroon? He'd asked, and Izuku groaned. It's still so weird to talk to him on the phone. Izuku knows Todoroki can text just fine, but he seems to prefer talking directly, possibly because he always seems to be doing something that requires the use of both hands already, like paperwork, or driving, or exercising. This is bad for Izuku, who is extremely anxious about talking on the phone always, and still has a strong time dealing with hearing Todoroki's voice directly in his ear. The time Izuku had spoken to him about scheduling the interview had been in the middle of one of Todoroki's workouts, and had almost resulted in Izuku's death, because he'd been so distracted that he'd ignored a traffic light and nearly walked into oncoming traffic. Izuku wound up having some thoughts later on that night. There were some scenarios he had imagined that he is not proud of, but it had been nearly impossible not to think about Todoroki's slightly breathless voice, right in his ear. So, it's dangerous. But he also really likes talking to Todoroki, so the phone is just a necessary evil he has to make his peace with. Todoroki meets him out front, just outside the entrance of the building. Izuku is surprised. He hadn't actually expected to see that much of him today. It's still a weekday, and Todoroki must be extraordinarily busy. He's wearing his recognizable blue hero outfit. Maybe he hasn't yet left on patrol. Hi, Izuku says, feeling suddenly out of breath, even though he took the train and the walk was short. Sorry, were you waiting long? I just walked out, Todoroki tells him. They told me when you arrived at the station. Izuku's information sensors all start pinging so strong he forgets to be shy about Todoroki coming out to welcome him personally. Wow, what? You have it monitored. Is that part of your jurisdiction, or do you share it with other agencies in the area? Is it for security purposes, for the city, or more like a private security type thing? Do you have a system set up at other stations, and how much coverage? I can't tell you the answer to most of these things, because you don't have proper security clearance, Todoroki says, and Izuku deflates. Oh, he says, right. But, if you want to come inside, Todoroki continues, I can have you sign a non-disclosure agreement, and then I can answer some of it. Izuku perks up. You can. He can feel himself literally shaking in excitement. This means he isn't just getting a tour, he's getting insider info. This stuff the pros know. Or, at least, some of the stuff. Todoroki inclines his head in the direction of the main entrance. After you. Izuku scurries towards the doors, and Todoroki squints at the writing on his plain white t-shirt as he goes by. Dress. Shirt. Oh, yeah. Izuku says, looking down at his cest. Because you told me to be casual, but I thought this way. My intent would still show. Todoroki just looks at him for a moment, before shaking his head. You're strange. Izuku beams at him. Yeah, I get told that a lot. It's true that Izuku may be biased. But within about 5 seconds of entering the building, he's decided, Todoroki's agency is the most amazing building he's ever been inside in his whole life. Wow. He breathes, standing in place and turning in circles to take in the entire glassy atrium. It has no ceiling, soaring up through all the floors with the sky open above them. That has a cover that extends to create a roof, Todoroki says, in case of bad weather. Izuku has seen some images of the inside of Todoroki's agency, but as it's basically a privately owned government office, civilians and press aren't often allowed inside, and neither is picture-taking. This is indeed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for someone like Izuku. Did you design this office, Todoroki-san? Izuku asks, as he signs in with the receptionist at Todoroki's request. No, that was Eiko, Todoroki says, just as a set of elevator doors dings softly behind them and the manager herself emerges, trusty clipboard in hand. Izuku is actually relieved to see her this time. Besides Todoroki and Eiko, he doesn't know anyone else at the agency, so if Eiko will be giving him the tour he won't feel as awkward. She's surprisingly nice. Sign this, and you're all set, she says, holding out the clipboard with the company NDA. Once Izuku signs, she takes it and smiles. Welcome to the Shouto Hero Agency. Izuku presses his lips tightly together and lets out a noise like a kettle boiling, before he starts bowing to them both repeatedly. Thank you so much, it's such an honor, I really can't say it enough. We're glad to have you, Eiko says. Shouto was very keen on it. Todoroki's expression doesn't change, so Izuku is left to flounder until she says, "Let's go up, unless you're still enjoying the atrium." "Oh, I am, but let's go." They talk on the elevator ride up, and Izuku learns that Eiko graduated a year before Todoroki in the business course. Her business savvy is all strong-earned. Since her quirk is entirely unrelated, she can turn liquids into any kind of shape she chooses. "It makes us a hit at parties, though," Todoroki says blandly, which makes the other two laugh. They stop on the main work floor, where most of the offices are. The workspace is very inviting and open, the desks not closed in by walls. The windows are big and let in lots of light, and there's lots of seating areas for people to gather. It looks like a really nice place to work. "I'll leave you to it," Eiko says, turning to go. "Oh, you're not giving me the tour?" Izuku asks, surprised. "No, I am," Todoroki says. "Unless you prefer Eiko. I thought you'd be too busy." Izuku practically yells, before covering his mouth. Todoroki is staring at him with slight uncertainty, and he wants to kick himself over somehow managing to make Todoroki think he would rather not spend as much time together as they possibly can. "No, Todoroki-san, I would, that would be amazing, but don't you have to work? I don't want to impose. Fridays are usually mostly for paperwork," Todoroki says, his face pulling into an expression that suggests he is not a fan of this in the slightest. "But I don't have much to do today." Because he's been staying late at the office the entire past week, trying to finish it all, Eiko mentions breezily. "Eiko, why you shouldn't have done that." Izuku gasps. "Oh, no, now he really feels like he's imposing." "He wanted to," Eiko says, before Todoroki can get a word in. "After all these years, I can tell when he's looking forward to something." She bows neatly to the two of them, before setting off. "She knows you really well, doesn't she?" Izuku asks, somewhat in awe. "Eiko-sen is very cool." Unfortunately, Todoroki sighs, but he sounds fond. "Where would you like to start?" "You're letting me choose." Rather unsurprisingly, the rest of the agency is just as impressive as its atrium. Izuku decides to beeline for the surveillance room, which Todoroki says is fine now that he's under contractual obligation not to spill all their company's secrets. Not that he ever would, but it's good to know they're careful. The control room is mind-blowingly high-tech, and all the people that work there have quirks that help augment their eyesight, or awareness in some way. The setup is baffling to Izuku, even when Todoroki and the security team explain it to him, but he's thrilled just to see it all. They make their way through different wings of the facilities, through the state-of-the-art gym and rec room that all employees have access to, before visiting the practice gym reserved only for heroes and sidekicks. This is, of course, where they spend the rest of the morning. There are a lot of people training, but they stop when Todoroki comes in with Izuku to say hello. Izuku recognizes them all and is fairly unable to stop his excitement meltdown at meeting them all at the same time. "Boo, is the little guy gonna be okay?" Precision Ox whispers to Todoroki, his bull nostrils flaring with concern as Izuku blushes, and sweats and hyperventilates his way through regurgitating Ox's entire heroic history up to that point without taking a breath. Todoroki pats Izuku on the back calmingly. "Yeah, he does this, just give him a minute." It would be impossible to get all of the nervous excitement out of his system, but they all recognize him from the interview already and he does manage to hold a proper conversation with them. After that, they go back to training, and he and Todoroki stay to watch. Todoroki seems to want to hear what Izuku thinks about their sparring, the strategies and usage of their respective quirks. Even though this is a bit nerve-wracking, it's also an immensely interesting challenge, and Izuku does his best to give his own input, ask questions, provide some of the insight he's gained from years of cramped writing collected in countless notebooks. Todoroki listens without seeming to grow tired of it. Next is lunch, at the sprawling cafeteria. All the food looks incredible, and Izuku has to try the katsudon, of course, but then the American cuisine section smells so amazing as he walks by that he also winds up with a huge cheeseburger in honor of All Might. Belatedly, he realizes it would be a travesty not to eat Todoroki's trademark favorite food with the man himself, so he gets a whole bowl of cold soba, which they both slurp together contentedly. Even Todoroki's noodle slurping technique is impressive. After eating it all, Izuku is unable to move for several minutes, while Todoroki patiently waits for him to recover. After lunch, they visit the research and development labs, and end up spending nearly the whole afternoon there. Todoroki's agency is well funded enough to have its own team of support engineers that develop most of the items and costume improvements in-house. Their work is fascinating to Izuku, some of it he studied and researched himself, but the cutting-edge stuff is all new and exciting. Todoroki doesn't try to hurry him along, instead introducing him to the team. They're all too happy to answer Izuku's questions, and he's brimming with them. "I don't want to bother you," he keeps saying, until the head of R&D finally tells him he doesn't have to worry about it. "You saved our boss's life, remember?" she asks. This finally and effectively stops Izuku's constant fretting. The sky outside the windows begins to turn from blue to pink and orange. It'll be time for Izuku to head back soon, so they stop on a quiet upper floor to say goodbye to Eiko. Walking through the hallways, they pass by a big corner office, and Izuku spots a name on the door. Todoroki Shouto. He thinks he's being very sneaky and walking slower and trying to peek inside. But apparently not, because Todoroki says from behind him, "You can go in, if you want." Izuku jumps, caught. You don't mind. Todoroki shrugs, shaking his head. The office on the inside is very nice, but it's not as intimidating as Izuku would expect from a typical pro-hero executive office. There are awards on the wall, and a small but neatly kept trophy case, which gives the illusion that these are stored here more as mementos than due to pride. Many of them are from Todoroki's time at Yui, some of them from his earliest years there, and a couple of them, award for Best Air Conditioning Unit. Izuku reads off one of the most ostentatious-looking awards. My finest achievement, Todoroki says, voice incredibly serious, specifically given to me by two Ilrius heroes. I'm sure you know of them, Chargebolt and Cellophane. Momo, Creati made the trophy. That was back in our second year. Oh my gosh. Izuku whispers, gazing at the award with newfound awe. There's a lot of stories about the students from Todoroki's year, All Might students. Izuku has devoured them all, but hearing new and silly anecdotes from Todoroki himself is a whole new level of amazing. Todoroki has picture frames on his desk, of his friends, his siblings, his mother. There is only one photo of his father, Enji, taken in the past few years, judging by the wicked-looking scar down the left side of the man's face. The relationship between father and son has always seemed strained, clearly evidenced by the Shouto Hero Agency standing separate to Endeavor's sprawling complex. There's not much public info known about why the two are so at odds with each other, and Izuku has never been interested in prying that deep. That particular facet of Todoroki's life is too private, too personal. A tinny beeping noise makes him look up from his snooping to where Todoroki is standing, leaning against the doorframe. Todoroki puts a hand to his ear. Eiko. What's? He pauses as he listens, his expression going from confused to alarmed. FCK. Todoroki-san. Izuku asks. Sorry, Todoroki says, we have to go, not here. Somewhere else. What? What's wrong? My old man's here, Todoroki says. He sounds more annoyed than anything else. Of course he'd turn up today. Oh, Izuku says, well, I can wait, while you. No, I don't particularly want to talk to him right now, Todoroki says. And I'm sure he won't see eye to eye with my taking a day off. He'll come to my office to look for me, so we have to move. They hurry out into the corridor, Izuku following behind Todoroki as they head for the elevators. They've nearly reached them when Todoroki stops dead and hisses, he's where? To Eiko, presumably, before grabbing Izuku's arm and dragging him through the first random door nearest them. Izuku yelps. The room they've ducked into isn't a room, it's a tiny storage closet, with a couple of shelves digging into Izuku's back. It's barely big enough to fit the assortment of mops and brooms inside it, and it is definitely not big enough to fit two whole people, especially not ones as tall and broad as Todoroki. It's a small blessing that Izuku is as small as the hero is large. All this happens in seconds, and on the other side of the door, Izuku hears the elevators ding as they open. Next he hears footfalls, solid, heavy ones. If footsteps could be described as intimidating, then that's what he'd call these. He realizes right away who they must belong to, and why they have found themselves here, hiding among the cleaning supplies. Endeavor, he hears Eiko call. It sounds like she's down the hall. What a pleasure to see you. Eiko, comes the greeting, and whoa, Izuku thinks, his voice is even deeper in person somehow. Is Shouto in his office? He's not, I'm afraid. A strange shudder goes through Todoroki, and he puffs a soft breath through his nose, and Izuku realizes in shock that Todoroki is trying not to laugh. He can't see him very well in the dark, but Izuku stares up at him, incredulous, and a bit delighted. Todoroki is a little sit. Outside, Eiko continues to painstakingly deter Endeavor from seeking out his son. She probably doesn't realize where they are either, and it's this admittedly hilarious detail that makes Izuku suddenly overly aware of the situation. He's in a tiny closet, with Todoroki Shouto, standing so close to him that he can feel each little tremor of laughter that shivers through the other man. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Todoroki lets out another quiet huff of air, and it happens. Izuku remembers the gif. Todoroki's captivating eyes, staring so intensely, and then the lip seeking. Suddenly, he can't stop thinking about it. Todoroki watching him, Todoroki's lips, so close to his ear, like they're talking on the phone except right now there's no phone. Todoroki is right there and so are his lips and they're probably warm and soft. Todoroki has grabbed onto Izuku's arms to steady him. His hands are so big his fingers can almost touch, encircling Izuku's biceps. So big. Todoroki is really so large in person. The shelves at Izuku's back force him directly into Todoroki's front, and there was little time to arrange himself better before Endeavor appeared. Right now, he's bordering on dangerously gropey, pressed up against Todoroki with his hands resting on the older man's broad chest. It is, Izuku really can't help but notice, exactly as firm as it looks when he's just staring at it from afar. Either in real life or in those somewhat risque photoshoots Todoroki very occasionally agrees to, the ones that manage to get him almost or entirely shirtless. Izuku notices distantly that he does run hotter on his left side, the realization a dim roaring in his head, buried beneath the mass of his stupid lizard brain. It's making things below the belt distinctly uncomfortable. Eiko is saying something that Izuku doesn't catch, and Todoroki shifts a bit, angling his body so he can turn his head to press one ear up against the door. The movement makes him shift, his leg juts out a bit more, and his thigh slots between Izuku's, and Izuku's soul abandons his earthly body. Oh dear. Todoroki is tall, and his legs are much longer than Izuku's, and Izuku has nowhere to go, so he falls forward slightly. The inner seam of his shorts pushes firmly against the sturdy bulk of Todoroki's thigh, and he gasps at the pressure. Awful timing, terrible timing, the worst FC King possible timing. Right now, trapped in a closet with Todoroki, with his crotch pressed against Todoroki's thigh, is the most mortifying moment possible for him to pop a beaner. If he had any hope of his dignity being spared, of Todoroki not noticing, it is quickly dashed when Todoroki goes absolutely still against him. Izuku couldn't say anything even if there was something to say, because of the danger that Endeavor will overhear. Softly, with no other course of action open to him, he drops his face into Todoroki's chest in shame. This is a mistake, too, because with his nose stuffed in Todoroki's shirt, he gets the faintest hint of musky sweat and the scent of some light, intoxicating cologne, barely applied but enough to make Izuku's head swim with something that feels like hunger, even after the buffet they'd eaten earlier. He closes his eyes and murmurs as many silent apologies as he can until he hears Eiko say, "Of course, right this way," followed by the CLC king of her heels and Endeavor's loud boot falls fading away down the hallway. Once they're no longer audible, Todoroki murmurs, "Quick." Izuku hears him fumble for the handle and the door flies open, nearly blinding him with the bright lights outside. Again, Izuku finds himself being towed along as Todoroki's hand closes around his wrist, and they run, making a beeline for the elevators. Todoroki jams the button with his finger frantically until the doors finally open, and they tumble inside. To Izuku's bewilderment, he hits the button for the top floor. He might leave, which means we can't go down to the atrium, Todoroki explains. But he won't come up. Izuku nods dumbly. Todoroki is still gripping his wrist, but no sooner does he think about this than Todoroki lets go of him jerkily. They're still standing awkwardly close together, silent, in the elevator. Izuku stares at the floor. "I'm Todoroki-sen, I." He doesn't get any further before Todoroki interrupts. "That wasn't very professional of me," he says. "I should have just dealt with it like not like a child." "I understand." Izuku swallows painfully. "You didn't want your dad to know I was wandering around here, right?" "It's not that," Todoroki says. "I didn't want him to ruin today, that's all." The doors open, and they find themselves at the top of the building. The elevator goes all the way up to the roof. There's a helipad, and a pavilion that looks like it might be used for social gatherings. The view of the city from the rooftop is stunning, especially bathed in the pastel colors of golden hour, right before the sun sets. Izuku would be awestruck if he didn't feel so horrible. Todoroki must regret everything. Now, for sure this time. Izuku has never felt so low. His dream for so long has just been to meet Todoroki, to talk to him, to somehow let him know the impact he's had on Izuku's life, how much he means to him. But God, not like that. Endeavor hadn't ruined things, but Izuku definitely had. And as much as he wants to slink away and never face Todoroki again, he has to apologize. "I'm so sorry," he blurts out, without explanation. There's no justification he can give. He just bows as low as he can manage. Maybe he should get on his hands and knees. "For what happened back there." "It's fine," Todoroki says. "That was my fault. After everything you've done, I'm not mad. I'll leave now, I'll leave and I promise you never have to see me or talk to me again. But I'm really so sorry." "You can't promise that," Todoroki says, raising his voice to be heard over Izuku's panicked stream of consciousness, "because I wanted to ask you if you'd like to go to the Heroes' Gala next month." Izuku falls silent. Slowly, he straightens out of his bow, to look at Todoroki, to see if he's joking. Or maybe Izuku completely misheard him. That must be it. "To what?" "The Heroes' Gala," Todoroki says. So, no, Izuku didn't mishear him. "The Heroes' Gala," he repeats faintly. "The annual Japan Heroes' Gala." Todoroki nods. "Yes." Izuku stares at him. Not only is the Heroes' Gala one of the biggest events of the year in Japan, but it's also, obviously, one of the most exclusive. It's part award ceremony, part entertainment show, an event that only the cream of the CRP pro heroes are invited to attend. Izuku's mouth feels dry. "How would I go to that?" "With me," Todoroki says, head tilted like a confused puppy. He looks so cute when he does that, Izuku can't help but notice. "I'm allowed a guest." It takes another moment for Izuku to process this. "Wait," he says, then practically shrieks, "What?" Todoroki's eyes slide away from him. He almost looks nervous, which in itself seems ludicrous. "I should have asked sooner. I know it's a bit last minute, now. So I understand if you can't." "I don't have anything to wear," Izuku croaks. There's roughly 700 other things he should say instead of this, but none of them come to mind in that instant. All he can think is that he doesn't have a suit nearly nice enough to wear to be allowed into the Heroes' Gala. Maroon won't cut it. Which is terrible, because he's never wanted to say yes to something so badly in his life. Todoroki looks at him again. "If I help with that," he says slowly, "you'll go." Izuku nods, and Todoroki does that thing, where he doesn't smile with his mouth or even really with his eyes, but Izuku can tell he is smiling, somehow. That's just what it looks like on him sometimes, and it's no less happy. He still doesn't understand, though. So he asks, why are you inviting me? The multicolored sky is Todoroki's backdrop, standing on the rooftop so far up, and the breeze blows and lifts his hair like some scene straight out of an anime. Because it's for heroes, he says, so I thought you should be there. He then has to try to awkwardly comfort Izuku as Izuku bawls his eyes out for several minutes straight. But Todoroki reassures him, as they stand together on the rooftop looking out over the city until the sun drops below the horizon line, that he doesn't mind in the slightest. Talking to Todoroki becomes, weirdly enough, far easier than it had been before the closet incident. Izuku still can't really bring himself to think too strong about what had transpired, but the fact of the matter is that it had been, bar none, the most embarrassing thing he's ever done. And Todoroki hadn't pushed him away. Not literally, and not figuratively, either. Instead, Todoroki had invited him to the Heroes' Gala, of all things. He could have not done that. Izuku doesn't know if Todoroki still felt a lingering obligation because Izuku had saved his life, but he didn't have to do something like this. So Izuku is forced to fully grasp, finally, that maybe Todoroki isn't going to get annoyed by being around him. Izuku is somewhat used to bothering people eventually, with his nervous habits and awkwardness. Who would have thought that one of the people he didn't bother would be pro-hero Shouto? The realization makes him feel lighter than air, and makes phone calls with Todoroki much less terrifying. Izuku's face still gets hot, and the butterflies in his stomach never really go away, but he stops worrying that every little thing he says is going to make Todoroki hang up, never to call him again. One quiet evening, Izuku's phone buzzes with a message from him as he's studying for an exam. He snatches it up immediately. Todoroki, do you have a minute? I wanted to talk about plans for the gala. Izuku. Yes, I'm here. All Might's voice announces he has a call a moment later, only managing to blare out, a foe, before Izuku answers. Hi, he says. Hey, Todoroki replies. This isn't a bad time, is it? No, Izuku tells him. I was just studying. This can wait until tomorrow, if. It's fine, really. Izuku insists hurriedly. It's nice to hear, good to talk to you. Oh, Todoroki says. You, too. It hasn't been that long since Izuku visited his hero agency, but Todoroki's words bring a silly smile to his face. Thanks, he says, and then winces. I mean, for thinking it's good to talk to me. Or wanting to talk to me. Thank you. For calling. I haven't even said what I called to tell you yet, Todoroki says. Right. The gala. Izuku asks. He's an idiot, but, as he keeps trying to remind himself during moments of crippling awkwardness, it hasn't stopped him from being invited to go to a gala with Todoroki. Not like with Todoroki, that makes it sound too much like there. He's just going as Todoroki's friend. His guest. He is Todoroki's friend guest. Yes, Todoroki says. I'm sure you know most of the details, but since it's out of town this year, we'll travel and stay overnight. I'll cover all those expenses, obviously, so you don't need to worry. Why you will. Izuku squeaks. He did know the gala wasn't being held in Tokyo, but he's been too excited to stop and think about how he would pay for things, or who would pay for things on his behalf. Of course, Todoroki says. The travel part is easy, we'll take my plane. Izuku has to bite his fist to keep from screeching. He's going to get to fly on Todoroki's private jet. He might not make it through takeoff. Okay, he manages to wheeze, finally. Good, Todoroki says. Now, the main thing I called to discuss. Attire. Izuku laughs nervously. Yes, do you have anything in mind? Any preference? Todoroki asks. The cut of the suit, the color. None, Izuku says, heading him off at the pass. Todoroki-san, you've seen my clothes. I have, Todoroki says, and I was trying to give you the benefit of the doubt. This makes Izuku grin. You don't have to be polite, he says. Just put me in something that's not going to embarrass you. You are going to be winning an award, after all. Todoroki huffs. Not this again. Izuku rolls his eyes. They've been going back and forth over this for the past few days, with him insisting, and Todoroki refusing to listen. Todoroki keeps saying that there are more qualified gala nominees, and that there's no way for Izuku to know. But Izuku does know. He believes Todoroki will win, without a doubt. He always believes in Todoroki. If Todoroki wants to be obstinate, then Izuku will have to be, too. I'm positive, Izuku says. You really seem to be, Todoroki sighs, humoring him. He pauses, inhales. But you wouldn't, you know. Wouldn't what? Embarrass me, Todoroki tells him. You could wear the maroon one, honestly. I can't, Izuku says, horrified at the thought. That's not why I'm offering to help you find something to wear, Todoroki continues. I just want you to be. I don't want you to think I'm embarrassed by you. I'm not. Okay, Izuku says. He currently feels embarrassed of himself. I never have been, Todoroki continues. Not when you saved me, not in the interview, not on the tour. He stops speaking abruptly. Izuku can feel himself withering away. Okay, he says again, much more shrilly. It is a relief to be told outright that Todoroki isn't rethinking everything, but he is not ready to discuss the closet incident yet. Wherever. Todoroki clears his throat. I can arrange to have you fitted for a suit. Oh, Izuku says, wow, that's fancy. It's a fancy party, Todoroki says. Could you make time in the afternoon next week? Izuku can, and so Todoroki tells him he'll book a time with his tailor. All the logistics sorted out, Izuku thanks Todoroki one final time, and then hovers nervously, not quite wanting to say goodbye yet. I'll talk to you later, then. Soon, Todoroki says. It reassures Izuku, somehow. Good night, Todoroki-san. Good night, Todoroki says. But before Izuku can quite hang up, he suddenly adds, I meant to ask, how was your day? Oh, Izuku says, surprised. It was good. He starts to tell Todoroki about a lab project he worked on that day, and then about his most recent club meeting. Todoroki doesn't stop him, and before Izuku realizes it, it's been at least another hour, and he really does have to force himself to hang up because Todoroki has an early morning patrol, and Izuku has to finish studying. The following week, Wednesday, arrives quickly. It's the day they've settled on for the suit fitting. After Izuku finishes with club activities for the day, someone will be coming to pick him up to take him to the tailor, but another member's presentation runs a bit long and the whole meeting ends up stretching on past their usual time to let out. Izuku waits anxiously, not wanting to be rude, but as soon as they wrap up he jumps out of his seat and starts packing up his things, sending off a hurried text message to Shouto. Izuku, could you let the driver know I'm on my way? So sorry to keep him waiting. We finished late. Like clockwork, his phone starts ringing. Panicking slightly, he fumbles to pick it up. I'm headed out right now. No rush, Todoroki says calmly. You said room 302 in the Humanities building, right? Yes. Izuku huffs, trying to juggle his phone, books, club materials, and the bag he's trying to stuff everything in as he heads for the door. Sorry, Todoroki-san. Todoroki, someone asks from behind him. Izuku spins around, phone still clutched to his face, to see the whole of his club staring at him, trapped while he struggles ineffectively with the door to the classroom. There's no way they could have failed to hear his brief conversation. Immediately, he starts to sweat. The first thing Todoroki had asked when he gave Izuku his number was if he could trust him, and Izuku just let it slip. He has it to about 24 random people. You have Shouto's number, one of the first years asks. Mayumi muffles an excited shriek behind her hands. Izuku says, as a bead of anxious perspiration trickles down the side of his face. Well, you see. Come on. The vice president pushes past the others as Izuku continues to blink at them all in terror. She surveys him very coldly. Midoriya-kun, this is getting so awkward. I know that you think you're his biggest fan and all, but you can't just make stuff up. Izuku gapes at her. She thinks he was faking the phone call. Actually, he can use this to his advantage. He has to admit that he, too, would assume he was faking the phone call if he wasn't himself. Eyes averted, he gropes for the door handle behind him, laughing awkwardly as he tries to escape. God, yeah, you're right. Haha. He has got to get out of here. He can never show his face at a club meeting again. I guess. There's no way he'd ever give me his number. Someone pulls the door open abruptly and he yelps. I did give you my number, though, a familiar voice says blankly, and Izuku realizes he never hung up the call, and that Todoroki is, in fact, now standing in the doorway right behind him. Oh, Izuku says faintly. Hello. He ends the call. Slowly, cheeks burning, he turns to face Todoroki. He can barely bring himself to do it, but he looks up, all the way up, until he meets Todoroki's eyes. This is vastly unfair. Izuku hadn't even realized Todoroki was going to come fetch him personally, and is he trying to kill Izuku by looking so good doing it? He's dressed more casually than Izuku has ever seen him, outside of creepy tabloid shots of him going about his day off duty. The gray Henley he's wearing seems like it can barely contain him, stretched tight across his chest, biceps straining against the thin fabric of the long sleeves, pushed up to his elbows. Todoroki looks good in jeans, Izuku muses, from somewhere far outside his head. He feels like he's having an out-of-body experience. The rough, laid-back look of his clothes is offset by the dark beanie and big sunglasses he's wearing, which gives him a soft and vaguely hilarious incognito look. Up close, though, it's still recognizably him, especially when he talks. Ready, is all Todoroki says. He's staring down at Izuku with a carefully blank expression that Izuku is too shell-shocked to try and puzzle out. Yes, Izuku says demurely. Todoroki looks at the rest of the club, who are all still frozen in shock, and nods. Izuku swallows, wondering what he'll say. Maybe he'll tell them all not to bother trying to get his contact info from Izuku, because he's going to make Izuku delete it. Maybe Todoroki is already planning on changing his number. I don't know if he's my biggest fan, Todoroki says, shrugging. He's a good friend, though. Sorry for interrupting. He waves in farewell and starts walking away. Izuku forgets to follow, momentarily just as stunned as everyone else. The vice president's mouth is hanging open. She covers it with her hand. Izuku isn't sure if she has anything else to say or not, but he quickly bows before she can get the chance and scurries after Todoroki. They don't talk until they're in the car. It's far too quiet inside the vehicle, and Todoroki doesn't seem like he's going to venture any comments. Izuku folds his hands in his lap. I didn't mean for them to find out, he blurts out, when the silence goes on too long. I should have been more careful. I didn't intend for you to keep it entirely clandestine. Todoroki says. I just didn't want you giving it out or pasting my number on chat forums. I wouldn't. Izuku gasps. I know, Todoroki says. His lips twitch. That's why I gave it to you in the first place. Izuku tries to smile, but it comes out wobbly. So you heard everything. I got the gist of it, Todoroki admits. Does that happen often? Izuku hesitates. Not all the time. But sometimes. She's that fan artist, Todoroki says. She comes to events a lot. I recognize her. Yeah, she seems like in a hole. Not expecting this, Izuku wheezes out a laugh. Todoroki-san. She's forceful. Forcefully and but, Todoroki mutters, which makes Izuku giggle harder. We just started off on kind of the wrong foot, he says. Briefly and with as little detail as possible, he explains their falling out to Todoroki. Todoroki's eyebrows rise to his hairline, and Izuku's explanation gets more nervous and scattered as the temperature in the car drops and an almost imperceptibly thin layer of frost creeps over the right side of Todoroki's face. I think I should have a discussion with her, he says stiffly, once Izuku is done. Nuo, Izuku mons. That might be worse. Besides, it doesn't bother me that much. I'm just relieved you're not upset. Todoroki sighs. All right, I guess I'm relieved, too. You are? Izuku asks. What is there for Todoroki to be relieved about? Yes, Todoroki says. I thought I'd made things awkward by trying to follow you on Twitter. Izuku smiles serenely at him, uncomprehending. What? I worried maybe you didn't want me to follow you, since you never accepted my request, Todoroki explains. But you said you turned off notifications, right? Izuku's expression turns to stone, smile freezing on his face. Like his life flashing before his eyes, his Twitter feed scrolls past in his mind. His intensely geeky, hero analysis heavy, Shouto-obsessed feed. The last thing he retweeted was a photoset of Todoroki's back muscles. He screeches. No, I can't follow him, I'm sorry. Benign shock filters across Todoroki's appealing face. Oh, not because it's not anything you've done. It's really not you, it's me. Izuku says desperately. Todoroki rubs his chin contemplatively. Not something I was expecting to hear at this stage. Izuku expires. He slumps against the window of the car in boneless despair. Todoroki-san, I'm trying to protect you. This makes Todoroki laugh that soft laugh of his. I see. Izuku cracks one eye open to peer at him. Todoroki really looks so good in his soft, comfy clothes, almost smile creeping onto his features, afternoon sunlight shining through the car window behind him. Izuku has always assumed that cameras couldn't really do Todoroki justice, and now he sees it's true. Todoroki always looks very handsome, but Izuku doesn't know that he's ever seen him truly relaxed. It doesn't surprise him, somehow, that Todoroki manages to be so much more good-looking in close proximity than in photos. What is surprising, but no less wonderful, is how funny he is in real life. You like messing with people, Izuku accuses, but nobody realizes it. So you always get away with it. Todoroki looks very deliberately out the window. But you see right through me, apparently. Izuku opens both eyes. I don't think I want to see through you. I just like seeing you for who you really are. Todoroki's expression softens for one brief moment, before Izuku adds, which is sometimes a jerk. Todoroki stretches out one long leg and lightly kicks Izuku, who grins and kicks him lightly back, and then the driver announces that they've arrived and it's time to get out. The tailor is located in a quiet upscale part of Tokyo that Izuku hasn't had cause to venture to before. The driver drops them right outside the shop, where tastefully arranged mannequins behind the glass windows display a variety of finely cut suits and other menswear. A doorman opens the entrance to admit them, and Izuku finds himself immediately surrounded by people offering to take his hoodie, store his backpack, asking if he would like anything to drink, providing slippers when he steps out of his shoes. It's like entering a fancy hotel as opposed to a clothing store. Wow, Izuku whispers, as they are led to a private room where the fitting will take place. A short, elderly man is waiting to greet them, bowing deeply when they enter. Todoroki-sama, so good to see you, he says warmly. Are you keeping well? I am, thank you Shinoda-san, Todoroki says, returning the bow. Izuku bows as well, feeling jittery. This must be Midoriya-sama, Shinoda says. Izuku WHP his head up. He's never been addressed so formally or politely before. Oh, I am him, yes. Excellent, excellent. Stand up straight, let's get a good look at you. Shinoda prods Izuku out of his characteristic slouching, straightening his shoulders, has him turn all the way around. Izuku thinks he sees the man's eyes flash purple, and then Shinoda is motioning for an assistant and giving them all Izuku's measurements, as the woman quickly jots them down. He can measure anything just by looking at it, Todoroki informs Izuku upon seeing his quizzical look. Izuku's eyes widen. Anything? Does it have a limit? Can you measure liquids as well as solids? Volume, I mean. What about? Incredible, Shinoda says. He glances at Todoroki. As sharp as you described him. I can see why you took such a liking to him. Todoroki nods, and Izuku blushes furiously. Horgs are very interesting to me. He says lamely, as if it's not obvious. I see that, Shouto says. Suits are very interesting to me. So I'm very glad Todoroki-sama brought such a bright young man to my shop, so I can ensure you stand out as much as you deserve. Oh, gosh, Izuku says, feeling very bowled over by all this. The lavish treatment, the praise, and apparently Todoroki telling people things about him. Good things. He's got to be careful not to let it go to his head. He thinks resolutely. Let's try you in a couple of our exclusive pieces, Shouto tells him, as assistants start to bring out suit after crisp, well-pressed suit. They get started dressing Izuku right away. He tries out standard black, charcoal, powder blue, even a dark green, but Todoroki and Shouto both survey him in each before shaking their heads and moving on to the next. Finally, however, he comes out in a light gray tuxedo, and both their eyebrows lift. This, Todoroki says. It has to be this, Shouto agrees. But it will need to be altered. He beckons to a different assistant, whose quirk seems to be similar to best genists. She can manipulate fabric, shrinking or stretching it at will. As she starts on the alterations, Shouto turns his attention to Todoroki. Have you given yours much thought? He asks. Todoroki shakes his head. I hadn't. I was thinking maybe a navy. Izuku makes a guttural noise in his throat that he doesn't quite manage to conceal fast enough. He purses his lips together immediately, avoiding looking in their direction. Midoriya, Todoroki asks. Nothing. I feel like that was definitely something, Todoroki says. What's wrong? Really, nothing, Izuku tries to insist. It's just, well, navy. Maybe, Todoroki says. Why? Izuku really wishes he could learn to keep his mouth shut. He can't, though, so he steamrolls ahead. First he tries to set the stage. Well, not that long ago, one of the people in my club did a presentation on you. She's a really big fashion buff, so a lot of it was on costume history. But she talked about the warring hairstyles era, too. The time when you were just starting out as a pro. Todoroki blinks. Is that what people call it? That is what people call it, yes, Izuku tells him, as Shouto nods knowingly. Todoroki sighs, looking resigned. I refuse to believe that there's anything worthwhile to discuss about the hairstyle choices I made when I was 19. Well, probably not to you, but people get in really heated discussions over it anyway, Izuku says. It's sort of all in fun, but also sort of serious. People argue a lot about what was best. Though I think the current favorite is still when you grew it out super long. Really, Todoroki says. His exasperation transitions to surprise. I only did that to piss off my dad. I knew it, Izuku says, snapping his fingers. You knew? Todoroki asks. How? The amount of press photo ops of the two of you together is practically non-existent from your Shoujo Prince phase. My what? Fan nickname, Izuku says, waving his hand. I always thought it was strange at the time, given you were still at his agency. You notice that, Todoroki says. Izuku can't tell if he's impressed or despairing. Izuku has realized by now, though, that his insane amount of recall tends to just amuse Todoroki, so he doesn't try to deny it. He told me when I graduated that my hair was getting too long and that it made me look like an anime character. I thought I could do even better. Shouto chuckles as Izuku smiles. He remembers the long hair days pretty fondly. Everyone lost their minds over every new picture, and whenever Todoroki had pulled it into a bun or a braid, it had been an event on a practically national scale. There were so many accounts dedicated to images of the nape of Todoroki's neck. You did look very elegant, he says. Anyway, the point is, a lot of people also have strong opinions about what kind of clothes you looked best in, pretty much based on what you were doing with your hair at the time. How do people have time to make these judgments? Todoroki asks. Don't they have jobs, school, lives? Clothing coordination is our life, for some, Shouto says sagely, causing Todoroki to put his hands together in apology. For your long hair, everyone liked the white suit best, Izuku explains. The one you wore on the red carpet to the premiere of Twinkling's first movie. Todoroki says. He requested I wear that. It matched your look really well, though, Izuku says. Was that your favorite hairstyle, too? Todoroki asks him. The question catches him off guard. Mind. Izuku considers. I think my favorite was probably Punk Prince. Please tell me you don't mean the mohawk, Izuku says, grinning broadly as Todoroki shakes his head. That was a joke, he says, real regret creeping into his voice as Izuku laughs. I only did that because I heard Bakugo wanted to get one. And so I did it first. Izuku wheezes with laughter. What? Why? To spite him, obviously. He was furious. Oh my gosh, Izuku says, as realization dawns. That's why he blew up in that interview where they asked him what he thought of your hair. I didn't plan that, Todoroki says, but he still thinks I did, to this day. Izuku isn't sure whether or not Todoroki completely believes him about the mohawk, but he doesn't push him further. Truthfully, Izuku had always liked any of the styles he'd tried out, no matter what they were. The rotating hairstyles had always seemed to him kind of silly. A more playful side of himself Todoroki didn't show very often, but that clearly existed nonetheless. But if he's being honest, Izuku would have to say that his current style, a bit too short for bangs, but easy to push back or to the side, always a bit windswept, might be his favorite. Maybe it's because it makes Todoroki look a little more mature, or maybe it's just because Izuku is getting to know him so well now, while he has it styled that way. Either way, it suits Todoroki. What suit was best on the mohawk? Todoroki asks, sounding genuinely curious. At this point, that's an easy one. The electric blue suit you wore for that benefit party. Shinoda says, clapping his hands together. I told you that suit was a statement. But you were convinced it was hideous. It sort of was, Todoroki says. He seems to be amused at finding himself ganged up on. Maybe I was too young to realize its worth at the time. Shinoda swats the air dismissively. He's as young as you were, but he's putting you to shame. He must have an eye for this. Oh, no, I really don't, Izuku says. He can see Todoroki's mouth twitch and knows he's thinking. Maroon. I just know what looks good on Todoroki-san. You are the expert, Shinoda says. So, what do you suggest now? Izuku had expected Shinoda to make the final decision either way, but Todoroki seems to be interested in hearing his answer as well. He puts his chin in his palm, thinking strong. Todoroki's hair now is the opposite of those early styles. He reminds Izuku of a film star as much as a pro hero, sometimes. His look these days is understated and classy, mature. Something dark, Izuku says, nodding decisively. Kinda. Mysterious. Shinoda says, approving. He taps the side of his nose conspiratorially. I think I have just the thing. Finished, announces the seamstress altering the suit Izuku is wearing. Midoriya-sama, turn so we can see. Shinoda says, and Izuku does as asked. He turns in a slow, full circle. Behind him is a mirror, and he pauses when he sees his reflection. The suit is fitted absolutely perfectly. The cut makes his normally skinny frame look lean and slender instead. The light shade of the gray doesn't distract from the dark green of his hair and eyes, and actually seems to make the color pop, as he imagines a person who knows much more about these sorts of things than himself would say. It makes him look pretty okay, he thinks. He thinks he could wear this to the gala and not feel like he's embarrassing himself or Todoroki. He turns back to face the other two again, smiling nervously, and stops at the look on Todoroki's face. Todoroki is staring, too, staring at all of Izuku. His lips are parted slightly, as if in shock, and his eyes are darting everywhere, taking in what seems like every inch of Izuku, studying him from head to toe. The way he's looking makes Izuku's face start to burn hot, but it doesn't feel like nerves, as usual. Todoroki-san, he says breathlessly. Is this okay? Todoroki swallows. Then he seems to snap out of whatever weird trance he's in, nodding jerkily. It looks perfect. Now Izuku starts to blush from shyness. He can only nod back, too awkward and furred to actually say anything. We'll take it, Todoroki tells Shinoda. Not long after the fitting, Todoroki leaves Japan for a mission overseas. He can't say much about it to Izuku, only that he'll be back about a week before the gala. Izuku spends the next few days in a fit of anxious excitement, reading up on all the info about the event, the heroes who will be in attendance, the awards that will be presented. It seems like time is passing both too quickly and very slowly. On the weekend, he decides to visit his mom, just to combat some of the jitters. Inko has been made well aware of all the recent escalating craziness in his life, and though she can't quite keep up with the level of his intensity, she does her best. She understands the freakouts, at least, after all. His room is only covered in Shouto posters, and the merch is all he wanted for birthdays when asked for the past 8 years. So, you're staying overnight for the gala? His mom asks as Izuku helps her make dinner. It's a quiet Saturday evening. The TV is on in the background, and the hero news program and running water and quick chopping of vegetables are all familiar sounds, a backdrop he's familiar with. It does help him feel calm. Yeah, just the one night, at some fancy hotel, Izuku tells her. Todoroki gave him the name, it's 5-star, and looks very nice. Oh, his mom says, smiling. Seems kind of serious. I hope it'll be more fun than serious, Izuku says, and she laughs. I didn't mean the event, I meant you, she explains. This relationship you have with Todoroki-san. He likes you. Izuku stops cutting potatoes to look at her. His mother is smiling as she cooks, little crow's feet around her eyes wrinkled with happiness. Izuku shouts as he realizes what she's suggesting. Mom, no, what? Izuku, she says. You've been on 2 dates already, and now the gala. 2. He splutters. Where are you getting these numbers? There was the time he invited you to see his agency. That was a tour. And the time he took you to get a suit, which he paid for. Because I needed one, Izuku points out. It was just a suit fitting. And you had dinner together afterwards. She asks like he needs reminding. Yes, but he made reservations, Inko says. This is all true. They'd gone to eat at one of the fancy restaurants in the area after the tailor. Izuku isn't actually sure, though, if Todoroki made reservations or if the waitstaff just let them in upon recognizing who he was. But it wasn't there was nothing special about it. Besides the fact that he was having actual dinner at an actual restaurant with actual Todoroki Shouto. It was just dinner. Because they were friends. Like Todoroki had told Izuku's clubmates. It wasn't like that, he says to his mom. Todoroki is just really nice. But, I don't mind that, at all. I like being his friend. Izuku, Inko says again, but it's not teasing anymore, just warm. She stands on her toes, and he ducks down slightly so she can embrace his forehead. I know you do. And I like that he likes being your friend, too. They smile at each other, and it's then that a few snatches of a breaking news report on TV catch Izuku's attention. brought into a local hospital after suffering injuries during a villain encounter overseas. The young hero was apparently working an undercover mission at the time. Izuku turns, feeling like he's moving in slow motion. He hears his mother gasp right as he sees the TV, and the news report, and the picture of Todoroki, overlaid on top of footage from whatever fight had taken place. He blinks, unable to process what he's seeing at first. Then it sinks in. Todoroki got hurt. The news report continues on. Although he is expected to recover, it was surely a very worrying brush with disaster. At this time, neither Shouto's agency or hospital officials are currently releasing any information to the public. Shouto, oh god, Izuku says softly. Mom, sorry, She doesn't try to stop him when he runs to his room, shutting the door behind him to dig out his phone. For a minute, he feels frozen. Is it alright for him to try to contact Todoroki? Will Todoroki even want to hear from him right now? SHT, Izuku murmurs, before he sends a text, fingers shaking. Izuku, please be okay. He's not expecting a reply right away, and he doesn't get one. For a long time he sits staring at his phone, before he slumps sideways on his bed. He doesn't feel tired at all, so he just lays there, staring at the walls. Todoroki, hot and cold hero Shouto, stares back at him from every surface. Posters, figurines, photographs, Izuku has them all, treasures each one that he's carefully and lovingly researched and added to his collection over the years. For his whole adolescence, he dreamed in this room, of what it would be like, to be a hero, to be somebody, to be on equal footing with this man. Shouto is his hero. But Todoroki Shouto is human. Like his quirk, he is two halves of some unnameable whole. Todoroki is hot and cold, he's intimidating and kind, serious and funny, unreadable sometimes, and an open book at others. And as much as Izuku idolized him as a hero, he feels something so much more for the person he's come to know. His mom knocks on his door later to quietly ask if he can eat anything. But he says he's not hungry. His stomach can't handle it right now. Eventually, without realizing he's fading, he falls asleep with his phone clutched in his hand. It's his phone buzzing that wakes him up, hours later in the middle of the night. Not a call, a text message. He gasps, instantly wide awake when he sees it. Todoroki. It's okay. I'm fine. Izuku doesn't even think before he dials Todoroki's number. It's the first time he's called Todoroki in response to a text, instead of the other way around. It barely rings before the line picks up. Midoriya, I didn't want to wake you up. Todoroki-san, Izuku says. His voice cracks, and Todoroki stops speaking mid-sentence. Todoroki-san. Todoroki's voice is soft when he murmurs, you were worried. Izuku starts babbling. The news only just said you were expected to recover, and I didn't know what that meant. I know that's stupid, but I couldn't stop thinking. He trails off. He kept thinking of terrible things, he's mad at himself for even considering them, because he knows Todoroki is strong. But texting Todoroki, and not having him call back right away for once, was so scary. You couldn't stop thinking. We'd missed the gala, Todoroki fills in. Izuku gapes into the dark of his room. I didn't think of that once. Todoroki snorts, and Izuku gasps. Are you teasing me right now? No, Todoroki amends quickly. I figured you weren't worried about that. But I didn't want to make you miss out, so maybe I was projecting. We'll definitely make it, though. Todoroki-san, I don't care about the gala at all right now, Izuku says sternly. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. He can't believe this. Todoroki is lying injured in some foreign hospital somewhere, mocking him. What a terrible, wonderful man. I am, Todoroki reassures him. It was just some bad cuts, a dislocated shoulder. Mild concussion. That doesn't sound okay, Izuku says, as heat pricks at the corner of his eyes. I've been through far worse, Todoroki tells him. Remember how I almost died the first time we met? Yeah, but you didn't wind up in the hospital, Izuku argues. That's true, Todoroki concedes. I guess it's because you weren't here to help me this time. Izuku's breath shudders. For some stupid reason, this is what sets him off. It's ridiculous. It was a 1 in a million chance, how they met, and even slimmer odds that Izuku managed to protect Todoroki, let alone save his life. And still, if he could do it again, if he could spare Todoroki from getting hurt. Todoroki says, when he realizes what's happening. No, that was a bad joke. I'm sorry, don't cry. Izuku bites his lip to try and stop, but it's never that easy for him. It was just a lot worse than I thought it would be. Hearing about it. It's the way my job works, Todoroki says. I know I'm being an idiot, but, Shouto, he stops. He's never, not once, called Todoroki that before. That wasn't a hero Shouto, that was a first name Shouto. That was an accident. He wipes his eyes desperately with his sleeve. Sorry. You're not. No, I really am. You're not an idiot, Todoroki clarifies. I appreciate you worrying about me. Oh, you don't have to be sorry about calling me that, either. Izuku knows Todoroki wouldn't be mad about it. He's very informal himself, and he doesn't seem to care about social hierarchy, or that he's older than Izuku or anything like that. But it feels like something really big, to Izuku. Izuku, Todoroki says. Izuku lets out a soft gasp that he is sure still carries over the phone. Todoroki has never used his first name, either, only ever called him Midoriya. His name, said by Todoroki, sounds. He curls into on his side, phone pressed to his ear, mouth wobbling hopelessly. Why yes, you can call me Shouto. Like, your hero name. Todoroki's laugh is low and quiet and sweet in his ear. Izuku shuts his eyes and thinks, helplessly, about his mouth. His lips. His voice is so close. No, Todoroki says, my actual name. Izuku exhales, very shakily and all in a rush. Oh gosh, I don't think I can do that. It's not mandatory, Todoroki relents, still sounding amused. Sorry, don't be, Todoroki says. Thank you, again, for checking on me. You should sleep, though. Yeah, Izuku says. It's 3 a.m., see you in a few days. Looking forward to it, Todoroki says. There's a long silence on both ends of the line. Mido, do we have to hang up? Izuku blurts out. What the hell, what a weird thing to. No, it takes Izuku a moment to register what Todoroki has said. He's still reeling from his own audacity. He bites his lip. I don't want to hang up, he confesses. Then I won't, Todoroki says. Simple as that. Eventually, at his insistence, Izuku puts him on speaker, laying the phone next to him on his pillow. The sound is a bit fuzzy, but he can hear Todoroki's breathing, slow and calm. Maybe Izuku should feel weird, but he just feels relieved. He doesn't have to hang up and go back to staring at Todoroki on his walls, knowing he's really in a hospital bed somewhere with a concussion. As he falls asleep, Izuku can't help but think about what it means that this adoration he's always had for the hero in his posters pales in comparison to how much he cares about the real Todoroki.